was not nearly as rosy. The 3 draws. Disorientation was short-lived, even though the slowing effects of cloying darkness lasted 10 minutes. The actual physical manifestation of the darkness began to dissipate after only 1 second and was completely gone after 3. Richter had used the time to pull out his life dagger and move far to the right. When the monsters brought their weapons down to strike, they found his former space empty. Their decreased speed, coupled with the fact that Richter was hastened, gave him an edge. He attacked the draw closest to him. He struck low, and his life dagger cut deeply into the back of the draw's heel. Even though the draw was undead, it couldn't ignore anatomy. With its Achilles tendon severed, it was not able to support itself and toppled to the ground. The other, to turn to face him, one swung a buckler at his face while the other swung its axe horizontally. Richter hopped back and cast ice dagger. The spike of ice struck the left draw in the shoulder. The damage caused was negligible, but the point of casting the spell wasn't to cause harm. The purpose was to keep its attention on him, and not on Yoshi moving quickly up behind it. Alma helped by striking both draw with a Psy Blast, staggering them. 2 swords erupted from the draw's chest. One was completely in line with its heart, but blood had long since stopped pumping through its body, and so the hit didn't register as critical. The draw turned quickly to reach Yoshi, but he jumped with his sword still inside of its chest. His body moved with the twist of his enemy's waist. As he moved, Yoshi kicked the other draw that was in the process of swinging its axe at Richter again. It overbalanced and fell on top of the draw that Richter had initially crippled. That stumble gave Richter the opening he needed. He fell on top of the draw's back and slammed his life dagger into the side of its head. It struggled to get up even with a blade in its head, but in its awkward position, he was strong enough to stab it twice more in the head and once at the base of the skull. The dagger went into its brain stem. The draw fell limp. Richter was about to give the draw on the bottom of the pile the same treatment. With a loud crash, though, the stone coffin opened. Richter looked up and took in the scene. Shin had fired an imbued arrow at whatever had emerged from the crypt. Daniela was firing at one of the first 3 draw they had attacked. One of the others was sprawled at an awkward angle. Impact burns all over its body. The third was alive, but missing a leg as it clawed its way toward the sprites. The Droshin had hit with stun shot lay unmoving. The grease fire had gone out, but not before it had burnt the guard to a crisp. Yoshi was standing over the kneeling body of his opponent. His blade was covered with congealed blood and was immediately to the right of a stump that had been the draw's neck. As Richter watched, the head was toppling to the floor. The most important thing to see, of course, was the monster emerging from the sarcophagus. A stream of black necrotic energy shot from her hand, impacting Shin's arrow in midair. It decayed the arrow to ash immediately, and even most of the infused energy seemed to be consumed as it let off an impotent bang, rather than the normal loud boom of an imbued arrow's impact. The creature was thin to the point of being emaciated. Its elongated face had an overly large mouth with 4 large fangs, framing a set of sharp teeth. Its arms hung past its knees, and the Marfanoid fingers were tipped with sharp red nails. The body was the gross caricature of a woman. The horror of her other features was offset by full high breasts and shining long black hair. Clothing covered her smooth gray skin. Completely naked, she leered as and squeezed one breast while taking in the scene of violence in front of it. Richter analyzed it. Crypt Mistress. LVL 29. Health 1100. Mana 800. Stamina 360. Crypt Mistresses are the bastard cousins of succubi. As opposed to seducing the living, though, they seduce the dead. Crypt Mistresses will invade the halls of the dead and undead and then bend them to their will. Even other demons are disgusted by their perverted pleasures. It's a magic user, he shouted. The Crypt Mistress extended one hand, and with a deepening of her horrid leer, 8 streams of inky black fluid shot out from her hand. They curved and contorted through the air to rushed directly at Richter. He tried to dodge, but the ribbons reached him before he could move. He wasn't the target, though. None of the party was struck by the Crypt Mistress's spell because it wasn't an attack. The ribbons struck the chest of every draw warrior, even the fallen. As one they roared, not in pain, but in strength. The bellow came from 5 throats, though, not 8. The 2 that Yoshi had decapitated didn't revive. Neither did the draw that Richter had. Stab in the brain. When the mistress saw that some of her guards were irrevocably destroyed, she hissed in displeasure. Both hands began weaving in a second spell casting. Alarmed, Richter started to get up to attack her, but there was movement underneath him. The draw on the bottom was lifting both him and the dead. Draw in all of their armor. WTF? How had it gotten so much stronger? Analyze gave the answer. It was level 20 now. Either those oily ribbons had buffed the draw, or it was an area effect of the Crypt Mistress. Whatever the reason, these bastards had bulked up. Richter was going to shout out the new danger, but a quick look round showed that his party had already figured it out. Shin shot another arrow at the Crypt Mistress, disturbing its casting when it was forced to defend itself. He had to drop his bow and draw his sword, though, as he fought a defensive battle against to draw. Yoshi fought the other 2 and scored hits, but his blade didn't cut as deeply as it had only a moment ago. Alma was helping by flying, round administering psi blasts, but they seemed to have less effect than before. While Shin and Yoshi engaged in hand-to-hand combat, Daniela was firing as quickly as she could at the boss. Initially, each arrow was met by a viscous stream of black liquid. Even though her shots weren't connecting, her arrows at least served to keep the Crypt Mistress occupied. That changed when the leering demon cast a spell, and a black circle flared into existence around it. Daniela's next shot splashed harmlessly the circle of protection. Only a distortion in the air that soon vanished showed that her arrow had any effect at all. The Crypt Mistress started her spell again. None of this was Richter's immediate concern, however, because the draw underneath him had gotten one arm free. It reached up and grabbed his left forearm in a punishing grip. He cried out in pain as he felt his bones grind together. If it wasn't for his bracer, they would probably have been snapped in half. That was when his light shield went out. He raised his light dagger to stab the draw, but then something occurred to him. His minor life aura had a 15-minute time duration. That meant that his charm spell, which had a 10-minute cooldown, could be cast again. The problem was the lower level draw had resisted his spell. So why would it work now? Its broad resistance had probably increased. The only way it would work was if it was distracted, or weakened, or all may brain drain. As fractious as the Psy Dragonling could be, Richter would never question her loyalty As quick as an arrow, her hastened body shot towards the draw that held him. She latched onto the undeed's desiccated head. The draw released its grip on Richter and immediately reached towards the dragonling's small body to crush it to jelly. Richter saw it move and he became laser focused on one fact. This thing would not hurt Alma. Focusing his will on that personal truth, he shouted the incantation for charm invoking the spell. The draw's hand froze, only an inch from Alma, as the spell struggled to override its will. It worked. The draw relaxed its hand. Alma stopped. He thought desperately. If she continued attacking the draw, it might break the enchantment, and their newfound ally would go back to its old pastime of tearing them apart barehanded. Go help Shin. She unwound from the draw's head and flew back to strafing the guards fighting his companion. Richter looked down into the face of his charmed enemy. And you little shit, go kill your old friends. He rolled off, and the elite guard easily pushed the dead weight of the draw off of it. It stood and ran towards the back of one of the guards fighting Yoshi, weapon raised. The sword adept had cut the head off of one of his opponents by the time Richter's charmed monster joined the fray. Yoshi hadn't escaped unscathed, though. One arm hung limply at his side. Blood still flowed from the wound in his other shoulder, and also from a cut on his scalp decreasing his left-sided peripheral vision. Despite his injuries, Richter trusted the warrior to survive. Yoshi was tough as nails. Richter turned to face the crypt mistress. He knew that he had to stop her before her spell was completed. Richter's thought happened about half a second before she finished casting. The demoness ended her incantation with both hands clasped at her breast as if cupping something. Then she flicked both wrists towards the ceiling of the room Richter was standing in. A speckled white globe, whose surface looked like a mushroom top, moved almost lazily away from the horrid creature. After it passed the black portal, it swelled to 3 times its original size and then exploded, filling the air with millions of tiny white spores. Richter tried to hold his breath, but the spores found their way into his nose anyway. Immediately his throat started swelling and his body was racked with violent coughs. His lungs convulsed, trying to expel the foul things, but each cough caused a small involuntary inhale, bringing more of the filth into his lungs. On his third cough, a gobbet of bright red blood made its way into his mouth. He tasted pennies. What was happening? He accessed his combat log. Crypt Mistress has cast unknown spell. Richter hit by unknown spell now identified as Cankerous Hell. Spores for 230 damage. Damage type S. Death 70%. Earth magic 30%. Death magic damage 161. Earth magic damage 69 reduced by earth resistance 20% to 55.2. Total damage 216.2. Constitution decreased by 1 every minute for the next 10 minutes. Endurance decreased by 1 every minute for the next 10 minutes. Loss of health cumulative with initial attack. He blinked the prompt away. 216 health lost in 1 AO spell. To make it worse, he was about to lose another 100 health. Over the next 10 minutes, they had to end this fight now. He quickly drank the enhanced health potion and his breathing eased. When he looked back at the hag, she had already started casting another spell. She gave him a wink as she made eye contact. A cry of panic drew his attention as Shin was clubbed over the head with a mace. His helmet dented from the draw's mighty blow, and he fell to the ground unconscious. Richter realized the cry hadn't come from Shin, it had come from Daniela. As the draw raised its mace to deliver a coup de grace to his companion. She drew and released an imbued arrow into its face. She succeeded in driving the draw away from Shin, but she paid for her heroic act with her own body. The distraction was all the opportunity the draw she had been dodging needed. With a powerful thrust, it stabbed its sword into her belly. The tip ripped through her and came out of her back. She coughed out blood as tears fell from her eyes, and a wretched groan came from her throat. A twist of the draw's sword caused a second gout of blood to explode from her mouth, the rent in her stomach causing the sanguine fluid to shoot up her esophagus and out on the floor. The wound in her abdomen, coupled with the damage of the spores, rendered her unconscious. The draw let her slide off of his sword. She hit the floor, and a quickly expanding pool of blood formed on the floor under her. Yoshi leapt towards Draw standing over her. He had finished. With his other opponent, half of its face and skull sheared away. Richter's charmed Draw joined the battle. Meanwhile, Richter ran at the guard that was once again raising its mace to Bastion's skull in. He knew the crypt mistress was still the real threat, but he couldn't just let his companion be killed. Brain drain! Alma flew in and wrapped her small body around the Draw's head while Richter was still 2 steps away. It stumbled in a daze towards where Yoshi and the charmed Draw had just disarmed their target. Once again, Richter had to watch a freakishly strong creature reach its damn hand towards his familiar. He wouldn't have made it in time, but then Yoshi's blue blade struck the Draw's free hand, scoring deeply and leaving frost in the wound. It gave Richter the time he needed. 1 step, and he recast minor life aura. With his second step, he was in position behind the Draw. Richter wrapped one hand around its face, and with the other drove his life dagger up through the base of the skull into the brainstem. With a faint crunch, the blade entered the cerebellum as well. A twist of Richter's wrist was all that it took for it to collapse to the ground. Yoshi and the charmed Draw had finished the last of the guards. An icy sword cut had started the process of severing its head, and the charmed guard's massive strength ripped the head the rest of the way off the body. Once the Draw was decapitated, Richter could hear the sound of congealed blood and flesh falling to the ground. Yoshi drank his enhanced health potion, and his left arm quickly regained some mobility. Before the 6 seconds required for the full effect of the potion passed, though, he pointed at the demon and shouted, "We have to overwhelm her protection. We need to wear down the shield's HP's Beffo." A black and purple beam of light exploded against Yoshi's chest. His body immediately arched back to full extension. The adept's head was thrown back in silent scream, and his arms were down and out to his sides, fingers curled against the pain. Muscles bulged, and veins stood stark against his skin. Then it got worse. Purple boils rose and popped over his skin, over and over in quick succession. The adept's skin looked like bubbles breaking in a glass of milk someone blew air into. A scream finally rose from his body, and he collapsed bonelessly to the ground. Richter took stock of the situation. All of his sprite allies were down and dying, if not already passed from this world. He stood against a demon who had yet to suffer a simple scratch. His only remaining allies were a small dragonling familiar and a charmed creature that in less than an hour's time would try to kill him. Richter fixed a defiant grimace on his face. None of that mattered. He was still going to choke this bitch out. First, he had to help his comrades, thought. He ordered the Draw to protect him, and then took a step towards his fallen party members to heal them. "What are you doing, my pet?" a sultry voice asked him. Richter looked at the crypt mistress in shock. "Yes, my beautiful boy. I can speak. I can think." She placed 2 fingers inside of her sex. "I can feel." "Here," she giggled. He recoiled in revulsion. "Oh, don't worry," she said. "I have no interest in you right now. Flesh bag. Not while your disgusting little heart still beats." After Thoth, she dragged the last syllable out, giggling once again. While had been speaking, he kept walking. He cast slow heal on Yoshi, but didn't take his eyes from the demoness. From the periphery of his vision, he saw that Shin was awake and was crawling over to Daniela's still form. The crypt mistress's eyes narrowed. "But I see your being. Naughty." Somehow she ranged her freak show of a mouth into a pout. The expression didn't last long because then she smiled heavily and said, "I'll have to punish you." A chant began to ensue from her mouth. "Kill it," Richter cried. The charmed drawguard picked up a mace and ran into the room with the demon, slamming heavy blows against the circle of protection. The chanting didn't cease. Dreading that he wouldn't have enough time, he ran after it and threw the life dagger at the horrible creature. The blade didn't reach its gray skin, but it did penetrate the shield and stuck there, seeming to hover in midair. Apparently feeling the life energy in the weapon, the demoness broke of her chant and shied to the side to avoid being struck. The draw continued beating at the barrier with its mace, and now faint spider webs of damage could be seen, emanating from where the life dagger had caused a break in the circle of protection. Every heavy blow made the cracks slightly larger. When the crypt mistress saw that the blade had weakened, but not completely penetrated her defense, she turned her attention to the draw. A wave of its hand and several whispered words were all that was required to shoot black lightning at the guard. The electrical strike hit the draw in the chest. It dropped to the ground, twitching. The threat now past, the demoness started furiously, chanting again. There was no leer on her face now, as she stared at Richter with deadly intensity. The few seconds the draw's life had bought served one major purpose. It disrupted Demon's casting. Knowing this was his only chance, Richter had picked up his bow and knocked an arrow before she had looked up at Life Dagger hovering in midair. A golden glow had already surrounded his arrow. By the time the crypt mistress figured out that the magic in the life blade couldn't reach her, black streaks had appeared. The scant seconds she invested in attacking the charmed draw saw the black streaks speeding quickly over the arrow's gold aura. When she began her spell again, the aura was equal parts shining old gold and ebony black. Richter had opened up the monostores of the village. The magic of the village answered the call of its master as 100, then to 150. Then more than 400 mana wove into this one strike. He felt like he was holding a severed power line. The arrow seemed to buck and spit in his hands. The arm holding the bow was having trouble bracing enough to keep the string drawn, but he forced through the pain. He knew that if he lost control, all of the power he had invested into the arrow would be unleashed on him instead. The gold aura now only seemed to peek through in spots. At that pivotal moment, Richter looked into the eyes of the crypt mistress, eyes that were brimming with hate as she frantically cast her spell. He released. The arrow crossed the 20 yards in less than a second. It struck right beneath the web of cracks that stemmed from the life dagger. The resulting explosion flung the draw guard's body through the air and into the wall, leaving a sizable dent in the masonry. The weakened circle of protection crumpled under the inexorable force of Richter's attack, and the demon was thrown to the floor, expecting the backwash of force. When the shield collapsed, Richter had hunched down and braced himself as soon as the arrow was released. While the force of the explosion was strong enough to rock him back, he was on his feet a second later and running towards Gray Creature. Brain drain! Alma swept in and wrapped herself around the mistress's head. The demoness screamed at the psychic attack, not paying attention to anything except removing the source of her pain. This was probably why Richter was able to pour the entire vial of basic life oil down her throat. A screech of pure agony came from the crone, and golden light began peeking through her gray skin in spots. She fell back, scrabbling. Red-tipped claws drew great rents in her flesh as she tried to remove the offending agent, but it was no use. More gold light leaked through the new wounds. As horrible as the agony the demoness was experiencing, though, she found no sympathy from Richter. While she was distracted, he cast Soul Trap. Then, with a look of utter contempt on his face, Richter reached down and grabbed the hair on the back of her head with one hand. He yanked back, causing the horrid mouth to fall open farther and exposing the vulnerable soft palate at the roof of her mouth. He spoke softly. "You're done." With that, he rammed his fist into her open mouth, driving the blade of his glass dagger through the roof of her mouth, past the crunching bones of the skull, and into her brain. A rainbow of colors exploded from the body, and for the first time in what seemed an eternity, all was quiet. Chapter 21. Richter left the dagger in the crypt mistress's mouth and ran back to help his comrades. He heard a faint sound and saw the charmed draw weakly pick up its head. Analyze showed it barely had any life left. With a dismissive sneer, he cast Soul Trap and had Alma drain it. Alma disengaged from the dead monster and flapped along behind him. Shin was cradling Daniela's head in his lap and pouring a health potion down her throat. He cast Slow Heal on her and then ran over to Yoshi. The bubbling effect had stopped, but the Sword Adept's skin was still covered in weeping sores. Yoshi was unconscious, but Richter was thankful to see that his chest still rose and fell. A ribbon of light heralded the last draw's demise. He cast Slow Heal, then dragged Yoshi's body over by Daniela and Shin. Richter slipped in, something almost falling. When he looked down, he was appalled to realize it was the cooling blood from the young sprite that Shin cradled. Shin was still slowly pouring healing potion into her mouth, but Richter couldn't tell if it was having any effect. If her chest wasn't rising weakly, he would have thought she was dead. He settled next to his companion and cast Slow Heal on Daniela. He alternated, casting the spell on Yoshi and Daniela once per minute, until finally, first Yoshi's breathing eased and hers did as well. Against Shin's protests, Richter then cast Slow Heal on him and made him use the healing ring. Feeling exhausted, he told Futon to stand guard. Then, he let the stress and demands of the battle pull him into unconsciousness. No time at all seemed to have passed when he opened his eyes again. Shin was sitting in the same place with Daniela's head in his lap, but now he was smiling. The female sprite's skin was still far too pale, but her eyes were open and she was speaking softly to Shin. Yoshi was still sleeping, and thanks to Richter's healing spells, most of the sores on his skin were gone. There was still a duskiness to his skin, though. It was a bit hard to tell because Futon's light gave everything a washed-out appearance, but he thought he saw the same duskiness in Shin's and Daniela's skin too. Resolving to ask them about it later, he put the thought from his mind. Richter didn't want to disturb the quiet moment the two sprites were sharing, so he quietly cast Slow Heal again on the adept, and then examined his prompts. Quest update: when good men do nothing. The draw you defeated were all honorable men who had fought for their people millennia ago. You have freed them from the demented control of the Crypt Mistress. To claim your reward, place the remains of their former queen in the central sarcophagus. The location of her remains has been marked on your map. You have been awarded 6,300 base 250 2017 x 0.02 x 1.25. Experience from Brain Drain against level 20 Draw Elite Guard. You have been awarded 12 848 base 513,900 by 0.02 x 1.25. Experience from Brain Drain against level 26 Crypt Mistress. Tring. You have reached level 16. Through hard work, you have moved forward along your path. As a Chaos Seed, you gain 6 points too. Distribute to characteristics instead of the usual 4. You also get 25% advancement to the skill of your choice. Crush your enemies. Honor your allies. Live. Your familiar has reached level 4. You familiar has reached level 5. You familiar has reached level 6. You familiar has reached level 7. Congratulations! You have reached skill level 6 in Analyze. Congratulations! You have reached skill level 10 in Archery. 2% bonus to aim. 2% bonus to damage. Congratulations! You have advanced from Novice to Initiate in Archery. 50% chance to retrieve special arrows after they have been shot. You have received 2,500 base 2,000 bonus experience for reaching level 10 in the skill Archery. Congratulations! You have reached subskill level 5 in Imbue Arrow. 5% damage. 5% speed of mana flow. Congratulations! You have reached skill level 2 in Small Blades. 2% attack speed. 2% bonus to damage. Congratulations! You have reached skill level 3 in Small Blades. 2% attack speed. 2% bonus to damage. Congratulations! You have reached skill level 4 in Small Blades. 2% attack speed. 2% bonus to damage. Congratulations! You have reached skill level 5 in Life Magic. New spells are now available. Congratulations! You have reached skill level 4 in Air Magic. New spells are now available. Congratulations! You have reached skill level 8 in Light Armor. 2% to defense of all light armor. Congratulations! You have reached subskill level 5 in Grayson. Combat. Dodge increased by 14%. Congratulations! You have reached subskill level 6 in Grayson. Combat. Dodge increased by 15%. You are diseased. You have contracted cankerous rot. Your constitution and endurance will remain reduced at their current level until you are disease-free. Contact with the uninfected may spread the disease. Constitution -10. Endurance -10. You have suffered a broken bone. The ulna of your left arm has suffered a hairline fracture. Decreased strength in that arm until healed. Strength -35% in left arm. The last prompt made it clear why his arm was still in pain, and also why holding the bow had been so difficult. It was the diseased prompt that was alarming, though. He didn't even take the time to allocate his new points. He quickly scrabbled back from his others. Shin and Daniela looked up in alarm. "Stay back," he said. "I have a disease." The two sprites relaxed. "We all do," Daniela said weakly. "Cankerous rot. That's why our skin looks darker. It's from that. A cursed hag spell." Richter was relieved that he wasn't a danger to friends, but understandably concerned that they were all suffering from this infection. "So you all have -10 to Constitution and endurance?" "Yes," Shin said. Daniela already tried the cure disease spell. She knows, but it wasn't strong enough. "We will have to wait to get back to Hisako or Sumiko. They will be able to help us." Richter nodded. He told the two that he needed to finish the quest and to just stay where they were. They agreed, and soon were speaking softly to one another again. He got up and accessed his map. The bones he needed were only 2 chambers away. While he was walking, Alma landed on his shoulders and nipped at his ear. He absently reached into his bag and withdrew a bit of dried meat. She snapped it from his fingers and then flew off with her prize. He quickly arrived in front of the alcove. There was nothing to distinguish these bones from any of the others, but there was no doubt that they were the remains marked on the map. He carefully put each bone into his bag and then walked to the sarcophagus. The remains of the dead draw were starting to smell, but it was nothing compared to the fetid corpse of the crypt mistress. The flesh that had given her soft round curves had apparently dissolved, and all that was left was loose skin over an elongated skeleton and a pool of thick midnight black liquid in a pool around the remains. Richter was about to walk by, just trying not to gag, when a prompt came up. "You have found Crypt Mistress Iker. You have the feeling this could be used as a death magic poison, as a corrosive acid, or to make a potion to lure the undead." Richter's mouth fixed into an expression of distaste, not just for the vomit-inducing stench, but also for what he knew he was about to do. He removed almost all of empty vials and carefully collected some of the ichor. Inevitably, some got on his fingers. The tingling feeling made his skin crawl on an instinctual level. It also started to decrease his health slowly at 1 point every 7 seconds. A minor irritation to be sure, but he hesitated to think what would happen if it was ingested. He was just thankful that the acidic property his apprentice skill level in herb lore had detected was apparently not active in the Ecor's base form. After filling the vials, he just couldn't stand touching the liquid anymore, and the pain from the tactile poison was becoming more than just a minor irritation. He wiped the vials and his fingers on the fur armor of one of the draw. After placing the vials in his bag, he watched the green skull and bones icon on his personal interface, and thankfully it faded. After a few seconds, he cast Slow Heal to replenish the small amount of health he had lost, and then turned away from the crypt mistress's remains. It was time to finish the quest. Richter walked over and squatted in front of the sarcophagus. He slowly and reverently removed each bone and placed them at the bottom of the coffin. Last, he laid down the skull of the long-departed queen. The bones began to emit a soft white glow. The light each bone emitted was siphoned into the air, forming an inverted funnel. It began to coalesce into a ball, which grew bigger as the light continued to be leached from the remains. This continued for half a minute until the bones looked normal again. Then, surprisingly, the sphere grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared. Richter looked around, wondering if that was it. It wasn't. rippling line of white appeared in the air. A second line appeared, parallel to it, and then two more lines materialized, creating the outline of a large diamond. Initially, Richter could see straight through to the back of the chamber, but the space in the diamond began to flicker and distort. He was looking at the sarcophagus. Then, for a split second, Richter could see somewhere else. He didn't get any true idea of what he had seen, but pink light etched itself onto his vision. The flash happened again, and this time a soft, purple light shone into the room. The flashes came faster and faster until the scene stabilized. Richter was looking at a skyscape with a configuration of stars that he had never seen before, either on Earth or in the land. Large silver black clouds floated along, and huge crystals stuck up from the tops of the clouds like towers. Periodically, the crystals would blaze with a random color, or the sky would light up like when lightning flashed over the horizon. You have been exposed to the light from the crystal spires of Mayo. All martial skills increased by 25% while exposed to the light of this, playing regardless of alignment. He watched this to blow for about 5 minutes. Clouds floated by in random directions until one that looked much like the others floated directly towards the portal. When it was closer, he could see that the crystals on top were not random collections of spires, however, but instead a carefully constructed fortress. The true size of this cloud was not immediately apparent, but as it drifted ever nearer, it became clear that it massively dwarfed the others that Richter had seen. It took up the entire diamond-shaped window, and the leading edges of the cloud moved past. Richter looked around, expecting to see the cloud filling the room he was standing in, but the scene impacted his reality no more than moving scenery on a television. The speed of movement increased. The view flew past the crystal fortress and continued on over rivers of luminescent orange water and forests of black stone trees. It began to slow again, and a small palace of blue crystal could be seen. A tall woman, not quite human, not quite an elf, stood regally with a detached expression on her face. The portal stopped in front of her. In one hand, she held a massive sheathed blade. Her other hand, she extended towards Richter, stopping just shy of piercing the plane of the diamond-shaped portal. Without thinking of the consequences of his action, he reached through the doorway and clasped her warm, strong hand. Without having seemed to move at all, she was suddenly standing in the chamber directly in front of him. When he analyzed her, he couldn't see here specific stats, but learned she was from a race called the Tephanim. She looked him over, wearing same cool expression. Then she looked at the destroyed bodies of the draw, Yoshi's sleeping form, Enshin, and Daniela's wide-eyed expressions. There was no change in her demeanor until she saw the crypt mistress. The transformation in her expression was frightening. A snarl took over the face, and she drew her weapon. It was a glowing white broadsword with black runes inscribed down the blade. She drove the point straight down into the gray-skinned skeleton. With a shout, she unleashed the power of the weapon, and white, wraith-like flames enveloped the blade and the demoness's body. After a few seconds, all that was left was ash. Richter was glad he had collected the ichor earlier. Somehow he didn't think he should share that fact with the Tephanim queen. However, once the body was gone, she turned towards him, her face still full of righteous anger. Richter braced himself, thinking he might have made a mistake bringing this statuesque creature from her home plane. She closed her eyes though, and collected herself. When she opened them again, Richter was surprised to see a touch of kindness on her face. When she spoke, the soft elegance of her voice was surprising. I think thee, warrior. I know well that freeing mine warriors from the clutches of that foul temptress could not have been an easy task. Stand and witness the good that comes from your labors. She began to sing. The language of her song had not been heard since before the world's oldest kingdoms were born. Ancient sleeping creatures of unimaginable power stirred at the resonance of the primordial words, stirring the land again before resuming their eternal slumber. She sang of a kingdom dedicated to strength and of a people dedicated to honor, of betrayal leading to its destruction. A small amount of the kingdom's people were saved by fleeing to another land. She sang of the sacrifice of loyal guards that stayed behind to ensure the safety of their people. More than just the loss of warriors, she conveyed that love was sacrificed as well. Her mate stood with his men on the wrong side of the portal. Finally, she sang of love, reunited. During her song, white light rose from the bodies of each of the 8 warriors one by one. Each light coalesced into a sphere, just it had over the queen's bones. Instead of disappearing this time, each ball of light expanded to form the bodies of warriors. These were not wretched undead. The light was pure spirit energy. The pellucid body showed the strength and nobility that these men had possessed in life. The last spirit to form was half a head taller than the rest. His regal bearing matched the warrior woman who stood before Richter. At the end of her song, a single tear escaped her. It traced down her cheek and threatened to fall off her face. Her lost love caught the tear with one finger, however, and with that act, in the light of the portal, the warrior became flesh again. Tis shared the deep kiss they had been waiting for, the kiss that not even death could forestall. They broke apart and looked at him. The queen spoke again. So long have I waited for my love. We are reunited again. Because of your courage, most noble warrior, we must depart this plane, but before traveling, I would grant thee a boon. We come from an ancient race of warriors and builders. The abilities that made us an unparalleled force in the land cannot be shared, as they are bound to our souls. The skills that we learned, however, were bound to the bodies which we will soon leave behind. I offer you one skill from any of us that you choose. All 9 figures looked at him and extended a hand. You have completed the quest. When good men do nothing, your efforts have reunited to long-lost loves and noble warriors with their people. Reward 5,625 base 4,500 experience. Personal reward, a new skill. Touch the hand of any warrior to view the skills they developed in life. You may receive any one skill and all of the leveling associated with it. Still not exactly sure what to make of this, Richter walked up to the first warrior and touched the proffered hand. Despite that fact, that the Tephanim still appeared to only be composed of white light, the warrior's hand tightened firmly round his own. At that contact, he looked Richter squarely in the eye. Richter sucked in his breath sharply. Suddenly he knew the warrior had specialized in fighting with the staff. He could hold back an army if he had the room to move. He was also a cook, though, and had delighted his friends and comrades many a night with savory fare. He was trained in medium armor and crossbows. As well, his uncle had taught him to fish, and he knew where to stand to catch the largest iron fin trout in the river near his home. Richter released the warrior's hand. He exhaled forcefully and took a step back, blinking rapidly. He had not expected such insight into the man's past. He stepped to the next man, mentally preparing himself before he accepted the proffered hand. This man was an excellent horse, man, and wielded a saber. He had an ability that let him bond with his horse almost to the level of reading its thought. It made him exceptionally dangerous as a mounted fighter. Richter couldn't learn this, but for a few short seconds, he lived through the feelings of unity the man had experienced when in the saddle. Despite not being able to get the ability, the man's master level horsemanship skill was nothing to sneeze at. He was also highly trained in the spear and the javelin, both of which would have suited his mobile style of combat. And so it went. Each warrior had his own weapon, specializations, and odd skill sets as well. Why would the thin fighter with the high-level assassination skill also be quite advanced in playing the lute or the dual knife wielder have something similar to the dwarven ability to sense precious metals? Several journeyman and adept level skills leapt out at him, but he still didn't make the mistake of choosing to quickly. There were also several skills that seemed somewhat silly. A master debater? Why would you want that? Richter always thought being a cunning linguist was a great idea, but in school, saying you were joining the debate team was like the rallying cry of the lonely, arguing all the time just annoyed people. So you were really just fucking yourself. Richter saved the queen and her consort for last, and when he finally got to them, he realized they were worth the wait. The consort was a master in heavy armor and swordsmanship, and adept in shields, and apparently horrible at weaving with a skill level of 2 and only 48% affinity. The queen's skills were the cream de la creme. However, she was a master of several fighting styles, but she was also apparently well-versed in the building skills of her people. Castle building, tunneling, portal construction, field fortification, war, camp creation. Hold the phone. Richter spoke up. Portal construction? For the first time, a faint smile touched her face. It wasn't a kind smile, but neither was it cruel. The choice of ruler. Are you sure, noble warrior? That was not my most advanced skill. If there was one thing Richter had remembered from history class, it was that empires flourished on their ability to be mobile. Rome had built roads to conquer the known world. Britain had built ships to become an empire. The Western Confederation had won W3 because they mastered orbital flight. If Richter could build portals, then nothing would stop him from doing just that. I'm sure. Very well, she said. She put both of her hands on his head, and his mind was ripped apart. Years of experience and massive amounts of knowledge poured into his head. Complex magical calculations and theories of spatial displacement became as easily understandable as left from right. She took her hands away, and Richter fell to one knee, gasping. The disorientation cleared after a second, and he looked up to see the warriors crossing through the portal. As each entered, they became flesh. More of their kind ran up and greeted loved ones lost eons ago. The queen and her consort were the last to go. The tall warrior bowed deeply to Richter, and with a soft touch to the cheek of his beloved, crossed through the dimensional door. She looked fondly after him, and then turned to Richter. Use this gift well, but never forget that a doorway opens both ways. She turned to leave, and then looked back at Richter one last time. Pointing one finger, she indicated the central crypt. With a small smirk and then entered the portal. The doorway faded, from view leaving the crypt once more, silent as the grave. Chapter 22. Congratulations! You have learned the skill, portal construction. Magical portals were reportedly once commonplace, but now only a few are reported to exist. You now have the knowledge and skill to create a magical portal. This will allow for instantaneous travel between this portal and a second one. Creating a second portal will allow for travel between those two points instantly. At the level of novice, you can travel only between 2 points on the same ley line. Congratulations! You have advanced from novice to initiate in portal construction. You can create portals to allow travel between any 2 points on the same type of ley line. You have received 2,500 base 2,000 bonus experience for reaching initiate level in portal construction. Congratulations! You have advanced from initiate to apprentice in portal construction. You can create a portal that can exit onto multiple types of ley lines. This can only be built at a place of power. You have received 6,000 to 150 base 5,000 bonus experience for reaching apprentice level in portal construction. Training. You have reached level 16. Through hard work, you have moved forward along your path. As a chaos seed, you gain 6 points to distribute to characteristics instead of the usual 4. You also get 25% advancement to the skill of your choice. Crush your enemies. Honor your allies. Live. You have either characteristic points or skill percentage points to allocate from the previous level. Now that you have progressed, again, you must allocate your points within the next week or they will randomly be assigned for you. Richter got back to his feet. He had lost track of his leveling, just trying to survive the dungeon. Now that he had 2 levels worth of points to invest though, it wasn't something he could put off. He could just see himself losing track of time, and then, whoops, he'd have 12 more point in luck. His first impulse was to invest in one of his combat skills. He seemed to have a penchant for daggers. The increase in speed could be amazing at high levels. Besides, everybody knew that Chun-Li was a better choice than Ryu. He couldn't do it, though. He was only 2 skill levels away from level 40 in herb, lore, and all the sweet experience that came with it. So he invested the 50%. They're bringing his skill level to 39. Seeing as how he was here to unlock another of his powers, he decided to invest all 12 of his points into intelligence. A quick check of his status page revealed how he had grown. Name, Richter. Age, 24. Level, 16. 11%. Status alterations, cankerous rot. Health, 330 mana. 420 stamina. 110. Strength, 29. Agility, 24. Dexterity, 34. Constitution, 15. Endurance, 11. Intelligence, 35. Wisdom, 21. Charisma, 24. Luck, 15. Abilities, limitless. Gift of tongues, fast learner. Cybond, skills. Herblore LVL 39, 17% to next level. Alchemy LVL 1, 0% to next level. Analyze LVL 6, 4% to next level. Pierce the Veil LVL 23, 45% to next level. Stealth LVL 4, 91% to next level. Traps LVL 21, 87% to next level. Trap Disarm LVL 21, 99% to next level. Archery LVL 10, 24% to next level. Imbue Arrow LVL 5, 18% to next level. Focus LVL3, 78% to next level. Double shot LVL3, 31% to next level. Drill shot LVL2, 40% to next level. Swordsmanship LVL2, 15% to next level. Small blades LVL4, 43% to next level. Unarmed combat LVL1, 10% to next level. Pressure points LVL1, 15% to next level. Light armor LVL8, 18% to next level. Grace in combat LVL5, 38% to next level. Air magic LVL4, 19% to next level. Life magic LVL5, 50% to next level. Earth magic LVL3, 32% to next level. Water magic LVL1, 23% to next level. Dark magic LVL3, 78% to next level. Light magic LVL1, 56% to next level. Fire magic LVL1, 22% to next level. Map making LVL max. Trade LVL14, 86% to next level. War leader LVL2, 43% to next level. Enchantment LVL1, 44% to next level. Portal construction apprentice. Marks, master of Mist Village. Blood oath, resistances. Air 50%. Earth 20%. Mental 15%. Spiritual 15%. Race, human chaos seed. Reputation, LVL3, you seem like someone worthy of my attention. Alignment, neutral. Language, all. There seemed to be a new dimension to his page. Status. Alterations, his disease, cankerous rot, was listed, and he could see that his endurance and constitution had dropped by 10 points. Each, he had to get cleansed. He had cast his spell cure, but it did nothing. He hadn't expected it to, but he had to try. Since he couldn't do anything about his disease right now, though, he pushed it out of his mind. His new portal construction skill didn't have a percentage next to it. He knew somehow that it didn't level like his other skills. It required a mixture of knowledge, practical experience, and an innate ability for mana manipulation. From the information the queen had given him, he knew that the skill would only be increased by building portals and learning more about the concepts that now filled his head. Discovering more lore was now a high priority as well. Why the hell did it seem like he had 50 high priorities? He bemoaned silently. He was not looking forward to how much it would probably cost him to buy the books that would give him the info he needed. He continued scanning through the information when something clicked. All gates required two types of keys: activation and destination. The activation key was unique to each portal and looked a jewel. It was set into the archway of a portal, and without it, neither incoming or outgoing gateways were possible. The destination key, though, looked remarkably like the rune that was attached to the armor he had found. He pulled the leather chest plate out of his bag of holding. With his new knowledge, it was clear that the rune was a destination key. So, wherever this Chuthrium gate was, the rune would grant him access, provided the activation key was present in the receiving portal, that is. It was a good bet that it would be somewhere near. The adventurer's gear had seemed custom tailored for this dungeon. He would have to keep an eye out. Richter got to his feet and quickly scanned through the new knowledge in his head. There was way too much to completely go through now, so he was just about to shut it from his mind when the list of building materials of a novice gate came to mind. 10 pounds of gold, a soul stone with a special quality soul. How many rubies? Enchanted with durability spells? This thing was going to cost a mint, and he had to build at least 2. Those potions of clarity better start selling, or he was going to end up turning tricks on the corner to pay for this thing. He threw his head back and raised one fist to shoulder height and shook it slightly in frustration. "Are you okay, my friend?" Shin asked. Richter looked back and saw that Shin had walked up behind him. Daniela was propped up comfortably on a pack, looking at him in concern as well. He realized how strange he must look staring at a disappearing portal, shaking his fist in the air. He was basically screaming Khan into a communicator. This was not a good look. A rueful smile found its way to his face. "I'm fine." The queen indicated we should take a closer look at the sarcophagus. "Give me a hand." Richter and Shin went over the sarcophagus inch by inch. At first he didn't see anything, but then he looked at the junction where the white stone coffin was bound to the gray slate wall. Stylized filigree adorned the side of the marble casket, and a 1-inch section of the stonework started to glow blue. He would never have seen it if the queen hadn't told him to specifically look. Richter ran his fingers over the area looking for a latch or switch. With some manipulation, it depressed at an angle. He pushed until he heard a click. As soon as the mechanism was triggered, dust shot out from every edge of the coffin that was touching with wall. There was a corresponding sound of compressed air being released. Richter and Shin looked at each other, then both grabbed the side of the coffin and pulled. The thing was massively heavy, but Richter braced one foot against the wall to increase the strength of his maneuver. The coffin slowly slid away from the wall. They kept pulling for several minutes, and they were able to move the heavy slab to feet away from the wall, revealing a hidden alcove. Try as they might, the coffin didn't move any further. Being the smaller of the two, Shin sidled between the coffin and the wall. He called for light, and Richter sent Futon inside. The sprite started laughing and told Richter to come in. Squeezing into the small space, he followed his companion. With some manipulation, he found himself in a small room. There was still a good deal of dust in the air, which triggered a coughing fit in Richter. It soon passed, though, when Richter raised his head and saw what was in the room, he started laughing as well. Shin raised his hand in a gesture he had learned from his friend, and Richter slapped palm to palm, giving his bestie a high five. "Yes," Richter shouted. "It's a Festivus miracle." Bags of coins sat on the shelves to the left. Some were cinched tight while others lay haphazardly on their sides, spilling their contents onto shelves or the floor. The right shelves had jewelry of various types strewn across them. The wealth would go a good way to funding his new building project, Richter thought with a smile, despite that it wasn't the gold or jewelry that really captured his attention. It was what lay directly in front of the two companions. An iron shelf was set into the wall. Above and below it were neatly stacked ingots of metal. The largest piles were stacked on the floor. He recognized the first as high steel. It had the same faint blue reflection as his long sword. The next bars of metal were white as cream. Moonstone, his prompt told him. On the shelf were two smaller piles. The first was smoky gray and had faint swirls worked into the metal. The next pile looked like silver, and though the bars were not moving, they had a shimmering appearance as if they might run off the shelf at any moment and pull at his feet. Cobalt and quicksilver he discovered. At the top of the wall was a final small alcove, and inside were 10 bars of what looked like dark green glass. Each was crystal clear with no impurities. When he examined them, he learned that the metal was something he had never heard of before. Elementum. He looked at the treasure of the Tephanim Queen and understood them better. While gold and jewels were valued by them as much as they were by any race, what took a place of honor was the metal. A race of builders and warriors, the potential of good materials was cherished. Not wasting any more time, he began shoving all of the loot into his bag of holding. He was never so thankful for the weight reduction properties of the bag. Without it, he would have had to leave most of the treasure behind. He poured all of the coins into the bag, letting the bag's autosort do its job. Then he skinned all of the jewelry with his wand. None shone white, but they would sell all. The same, he thought happily. He took it all. Everything except a gold bracelet beset with amber. That Shin said he would like to keep. Having a good idea who would be receiving it as a gift. Richter agreed with a faint smile. Shin just huffed when he saw his friend's grin and went back to shoving the jewelry into the bag. When they were done with the side shelves, they started loading the ingots. The large piles disappeared into the black bag, which never seemed to get any bigger. To Richter, though, it was clearly getting heavier. When he touched the moonstone pile, a screen filled his vision. Quest update: the right tool for the job. You have found a higher quality metal. Bring this metal back to the dwarves of your village. Once you have picked which metal you will use to create your magic forge, your quest will be finished. Make your forge and collect your prize. My thoughts exactly, Richter thought with a smile. They loaded the rest of the metal and left the treasure room. The bag was extremely heavy now, but it was still well below his max carrying capacity of 290 kilos. Daniela had fallen back asleep and was snoring ever so softly. Yoshi's chest continued to rise and fall regularly, but he still hadn't woken up. The smile slipped from Richter's face when he saw his injured comrades again. Despite having restored their health points as much as he could, some things apparently still took a while to recover from. Whatever toll the crypt mistress's last spell had taken, Yoshi would still need more time. As for Daniela and her one complexion, healing did not replace the blood she had lost. The Smurfette would need to replenish her fluids. Richter looked at Shin, whose own mood had sobered as well. We need to get out of this dungeon. We can't just sit and wait for them to heal, though. Who knows if this disease will ever heal on its own? It might even get worse. I say we open the next hatch and face what comes. Shin nodded, his face firm. The two of us have always been enough in the past. We will be equal to whatever challenge comes our way. Richter nodded and set Shin to gather their things. He moved around the rooms and collected the weapons and armor from the fallen draw. Nothing was left of the crypt mistress but ash. His dagger was laying in the remains. The queen's spell had removed 60 durability, but the impossibly hard glass dagger still had 73 to 150ths durability left. He resheathed the weapon at his waist and moved on. The draw had a combination of bronze, iron, and steel. Weapons and their armor was iron, leather, or hide. None of it was noteworthy, but waste not want not was Richter's policy. His life dagger had not fared so well as its glass counterpart. Only 10% of its original 20 durability remained. He knew he couldn't trust it in a fight again. Not that he would have even if he could. Both daggers' attack stats had decreased with their drop in durability. He placed the life dagger in his bag nonetheless, in case it could be repaired by his smiths. By the time he was done, Shin had rolled up his bedroll and gathered up Daniela's items, now ready to move. She gave a slight whimper as he picked her up, but otherwise didn't complain. Richter picked Yoshi up in a fireman's carry and started walking back towards the central chamber. Shin followed quickly behind, and Futen hovered above them, illuminating their way. Alma was flying ahead, crooning in delight. When he asked why, she sent him an image of a stunned rat. The dragonling had apparently found something to break her fast of dried tack, and her recent feast had put her in a grand mood. Soon all of them were back in the light of the golden column. They left their wounded comrades right next to the column, but they arranged them so that the column was between them and the hatch. If any enemies emerged from the soon-to-be open round door, maybe Yoshi and Daniela wouldn't be noticed at first. Every second they went unseen was another second that Richter and Shin could deal with the potential threat. The two friends buffed up and then stood in front of the hatch. Richter also allocated Alma's new points. Staying with the same plan, he increased brain drain by 2 levels using all 5 of her unused points. You have chosen to increase your familiar's ability, brain drain, to level 3. Successful kills will now give 3% of total experience to both you and your familiar. Drain occurs faster. Stun can occur on enemies level 11 and below. You have chosen to increase your familiar's ability, brain drain, to level 4. Successful kills will now give 4% of total experience to both you and your familiar. Drain occurs faster. Stun can occur on enemies level 16 and below. Richter would have to wait for more levels before leveling. Brain drain again. Luckily, there didn't seem to a time limit to allocating points for his familiar, like there was for himself. He checked her status page. Name, Alma. Level, 7%. Health, 170 mana. 170 stamina. 170. Unused level points, 0. Abilities. Psybond, LVL1, points to next level, 1. Psyblast, LVL1, points to next level, 1. Brain Drain, LVL4, points to next level, 4. Can use air magic, resistances, mental, 100%, air, 50%. Race, Psy Dragonling. He was happy to see her basic stats had increased with her level. Also, she remained disease-free. Either she had been immune to the demon's disease spell, or she had avoided it altogether. She hovered in the air above his head, ready to face whatever danger was about to come. The hatch wheel easily fastened to the indentation set into the round door. Shin stood several steps behind him and to the right. An arrow was knocked and partially drawn. With a last nod to his companion, Richter took a deep breath and twisted the wheel. He yanked the hatch open, ready for battle. There was no one to fight. Taking deep breaths to calm his racing heart, he looked at Shin and laughed shakily. The sprite was clearly relieved as well. All that the hatch revealed was a narrow tunnel slightly smaller round than the hatch itself. Brown vines hugged all surfaces of tunnel that Richter could see. Having a high suspicion of what to expect, he immediately shone his wand on any surface it could reach. Words were soon revealed, emblazoned on the stone around the lip of the tunnel. The area had been completely hidden by the edges of the hatch, but now revealed. Their next riddle. As we all enter, so do we all leave? Obey this truth or be crushed by your weakness? Richter looked at Shin confused. He was really getting tired of riddles. His companion looked back at him with a sure expression. Alone? What? Richter asked. Alone, Shin repeated. We all enter this world and leave it the same way, by ourselves. The riddle means only one of us can enter at a time. Richter grimaced. He didn't like the idea of splitting up. This dungeon had almost killed them plenty of times, but the fact remained that they had to get out of this place. If there was one thing that had held true so far, though, it was that obeying these riddles would keep them alive. He nodded and began to take off his arms and armor. The tunnel would be too small for him to crawl through wearing what he had on. Shin stopped him. I am the one that should go, the sprite said. Richter shook his head and prepared to argue, but Shin cut him off. You know that in that small space, I'm the better choice. You were already about to remove you weapons. I don't like the idea of us splitting up either, but the idea of going into a new area of this dungeon without protection is insane. I will handle this. You focus on protecting our friends. Shin gave him a cocky smile. This is what we do, brother. Richter couldn't keep the smile from his face even though he tried. He agreed on the condition that Shin tie a rope around his waist. If he got into trouble, Richter could pull him out quickly. Shin agreed and handed him his pack. Richter gave him to health potions just in case. After slipping the potions into a belt pouch, the sprite got into the tunnel and started walking forward at a crouch. The tunnel couldn't have been longer than 50 yards. Richter cast Farlight, anchoring the ball of light halfway down the tunnel. Richter watched his companion move forward, ready to pull him back in an instant. After Shin had crossed the halfway point, though, suddenly Richter couldn't see him. The sprite hadn't disappeared. Instead, the tunnel now ended in a blank wall, illuminated by a hovering ball of white light. The rope led directly into the rock. Alarmed, Richter shouted and tried to pull the rope. It was like he was trying to rip a piece of a mountain off. There was absolutely no give no matter how hard he pulled. Dropping the rope, he started to climb into the tunnel. As soon as his hand crossed the threshold, though, a grinding noise ensued. The tunnel started constricting like an iris. It wasn't just the opening, though. Richter could see that the entire length shaft was getting smaller. He withdrew his hand quickly. He didn't have more than a fingertip in for more than 2 seconds, but the tunnel had perceptibly shrunk. There was no way he could reach Shin before the tunnel was completely shut, let alone have enough time to bring him back to safety. Richter had no idea how solid stone could flex like a muscle, but he did know that his companion was on his own. Chapter 23. Shin didn't hear anything strange, but he sensed something was amiss. He looked back and saw only a blank wall of brown stone. His heart started slamming painfully inside of his chest. He couldn't be trapped. Not again. His fear threatened to incapacitate him, but then he heard the trilling call of a forest lark. Shin turned his head back forward. He was confused but was intending to scramble the last distance out of the tunnel, but stopped, shocked by what he was seeing. He was in the forest on an exceptionally beautiful day. It was autumn, and the beauty of the changing leaves complemented the smells of the changing seasons. There was the sweetness of decay from the fallen leaves, the somehow sharp scent of cooling wind down from the mountains. He didn't understand what was going on, but there was something familiar about the scene. Shin, why didn't you wait for me? I told you I was coming. Too. When he heard that boyish sprite voice, an even greater feeling of dread rose in his breast. He turned and saw the face of his best childhood friend, Kurian. The sprite's youthful cheeks were somewhat ruddy from both the run he had just finished and the brisk chill in the air. Shin now knew what day this was. It was the one day he spent his entire life trying to forget. The events of this day were why he had let Richter be torn apart by wolves. This was the day that he had killed his best friend. The one thing that all sprites learned from an early age was to avoid human lands. It was drilled into them again and again. Shin had needed to prove himself, though, so he goaded his best friend into coming with him on a horrible misadventure. Seeing Kurian again after so long, Shin's spirit tried to shout, "Turn back! Don't do this!" But he had no control over his younger body's actions. He was trapped as a spectator, just along for the ride. "Don't take so long next time, Curry," Youngshin said, laughing. "I heard the hunters talking about how they had seen humans at the boundary of the forest. Are you ready?" Despite his earlier protestations, Kurian's face adopted a doubtful expression. "Yeah, of course, I am. But maybe we should go tomorrow or the next day. Elder Yemen is making sprangleberry pie today, and..." Shin cut him off. "If you are too scared, just stay behind." He turned to go, but waited expectantly before starting to walk again. Kurian immediately hurried to catch up to him, espousing his limitless courage. He fell into line just as he always did when Shin baited him, just as Shin knew he would. The two boys ran through the forest. The sprite's racial ability of concealment made it easy to avoid any predators. They were instinctually in tune with forest around them. They also knew that they would not be missed anytime soon. It was the nature of sprites to wander the woods communing with nature, so their absence for a day would not raise any suspicion. All the elements for their trip were in place. That night they drank sweet berry juice that Shin had stolen from his mother's larder. They praised themselves for embarking on such a grand adventure. What brave explorers they were! When it was time to sleep, both climbed into the limbs of a massive oak. Well hidden by the changing leaves, they both let themselves be carried away into dreams of adventure. The next morning, Shin awoke first and nudged his friend. After performing the necessary functions of every morning, they resumed their great quest to see the humans. They played tricks on each other while they traveled. Kurian would peg the back of Shin's unsuspecting head with a mud pie. Later during a noon nap, somehow a newt wet from the river would make its way down Kurian's shirt. Shin looked on with a shocked and innocent expression while his friend shrieked and cursed. They both enjoyed their journey, and nothing seemed to be able to ruin their mood. That was when they found the body of a deer. Both were confused by what they were seeing at first. It had been killed by an arrow that was clear enough, but the body hadn't been treated in the way they had been taught. Instead, great hunks of meat had been cut off with no concern towards saving the pelt. Much of the deer had been left to rot as well. It was in opposition of everything they knew. Death was part of life. That truth had never been hidden from the young sprites. Killing another living creature was not to be taken lightly. However, Hunting was both a responsibility and a sacred honor. No part of an animal was ever wasted. What they saw before them was savagery. Their mood now somber, they continued to follow the trail that led from the carcass ever farther from the hearth tree. Another few hours of travel brought them to the camp of the humans. The smell was what they noticed first. The humans seemed to have just emptied their bowels and bladders in random places rather than create a proper site to dispose of their waste. They stayed hidden as they walked through the trees. When they were closer, Shin heard squeals of pain followed by cruel laughter. The smell of cooking meat drifted through the woods, and they caught the first glimpses of the camp through the trees. Another minute of walking, and they saw the most horrible sight of their young lives. There were 4, no 5, humans in the camp. 2 wagons were nearby filled with stacked cages. More than half were filled with some of the more dangerous creatures of the forest. Feline, brown fangs, red forest dogs, chittering scree, and even several skeelings. They were all caged separately and seemed furious about their situation. The squeal of pain they heard, though, was from a cave badger. The humans had made their camp beside a small crevasse that was about 7 feet deep. Both entrances were blocked with rocks, preventing escape. A badger huddled near one entrance. Its body was pressed up against the rocks in an attempt to avoid the other denizen of fissure. The humans had driven a spike into the ground near the other entrance. A heavy length of chain was attached to it. The other end of the chain was tied around the neck of a razorling, 5 feet long. The razorling stood on 4 paws. Each finger was tipped with a curved and wicked talon. The creature's body was thin and clearly built for speed. Its mouth was filled with razor-sharp fangs that were snapping open and shut only inches away from the badger. Even sprites avoided packs of these sadistic hunters. The razorlings gained their name by the tendency to toy with prey. They never killed quickly if they could avoid it, but instead would disable. Then, to the sound of their cackling laughter, would swipe at the body of their victim, making small razor-sharp incisions. The sprite hunters had told Shin it could take near an hour for the razorlings to finish their kill. The chain was short enough that the badger was safe, but only so long as it huddled at the far end of the crevasse. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough entertainment for the humans. 4 of the filthy men were standing around the lip of crevice, laughing and hooting. The 5th was down in the crevasse, but on the other side of the stone wall from the badger. The men had left a small hole in the wall, and they used it to poke a spear at the poor creature. Never too deeply, but enough to cause it to shy away from the weapon. That would, of course, bring it closer to the razorling, who would struggle to reach. The badger with renewed vigor. The fear of the predator would overwhelm the pain of the spear, and the badger would huddle against the stone wall again. All of this happened to the cheers and horrible laughter of the men, drinking from jugs and slapping each other on the back. After a minute, one would shout in common tongue, more. The man behind the wall would jab the spear forward, and the entire travesty would start again. Shin and Kyrian watched this with horror. They had never been exposed to wanton cruelty before. They both lost their innocence that night, watching while the men tortured the cave badger for mere amusement. It wasn't long before even the small squeals of pain and terror the men were eliciting weren't enough to quench their appetites. One of the men, with a large scar on his face, took a long pull of whatever they were drinking and said, "Finish it raw." The man stabbed the badger again, but instead of withdrawing, This time, he continued to push the animal forward. The badger squealed in panic, but the pain of the spear tip kept it from retreating. With a forceful jab, the badger jumped away from the weapon and into the reach of the Razorling. No, Kyrian shouted. Shin clapped his hand over his friend's mouth, afraid to draw the attention of the evil humans. One of the men looked up to locate the source of the noise. Luckily, the other drunkards were too, obsessed with their vicious sport to hear. Soon the one man who had heard Kyrian looked back to Crevasse to enjoy the dying screams the forest animal. The two boys huddled in the undergrowth, afraid to move, and learned that the sprite hunters had been wrong. The screams of the badger only lasted half an hour. Night was falling by the time the men walked away from their amusement. They walked over to where they had been roasting their meat and settled down with a fresh jug. "Did you see all that blood?" one man with a scraggly red beard asked. "We will get a great price for that thing in the pits." "Ha ha ha," another replied. "I say we throw something else in." Later, the other men cheered and agreed. The man with the scar stood up. "Now listen, you motherless pigs. A bit of fun is one thing, but I won't have you cutting into our profits. Now get some sleep, because we leave in the morning. We have enough in the cages, and I'm tired of these stinking woods. Rawl, you have first watch." One or two of the men grumbled, but no real dissent was raised. They settled in for the night, except for Rawl. He sat with his back to the fire, looking disinterested in his duties as guard. Once Shin heard the sounds of snoring, he motioned for Kyrian to follow him away from the camp. They stayed silent until they were several hundred yards away. Then Shin paused and whispered urgently, "Stop, Kyrian." "What?" his friend hissed back. "Why? We need to get away from here. They are going to torture and kill all of those animals. We have to free them." "No," Kyrian said, shaking his head. "When we can get back, we can tell the warriors. They will be able to stop them." "Those humans are leaving at dawn," Shin argued. "They might leave the forest before the warriors can catch them." He drew himself up, puffing out his chest. "It is our duty to protect the forest and its creatures." He had heard his mother say the same thing many times. Shin knew full well that she had not meant for two sprite youths to risk death against a band of cutthroats, but he wouldn't let that stand in the way of his youthful bravado. "Shin," Kyrian pleaded, fear evident on his face, "there are only two of us. Those humans are full grown, and they have weapons." Shin's expression became condescending and judgmental. "Will do my duty as a sprite. You can leave if you are afraid." He turned and started walking back to the camp. Kyrian fell into line just as he always did when Shin baited him, just as Shin knew he would. Watching this memory unfold, Shin's spirit struggled with renewed fury to take control of his younger self. He didn't want to see what was about to happen. Living through it once was more than anyone should ever have to endure. Despite his efforts, though, he remained only a spectator. The two sprites walked back towards the camp. When they got closer, they circled round to come at the wagon from the opposite direction. Shin's plan was simple. They would sneak up to the cages, keeping the wagon between themselves and the men as cover. All of the cages on one side were locked with the same chain. Shin would break the lock and Kyrian would pull the chain. They might not free all of the animals, but they would free most. In the chaos afterwards, the two boys would fade back into the forest and then go back to the hearth tree to warn their people. At first, It looked like Shin's plan would work. The two boys made their way to the wagon undetected. The lock did not seem to. Large, and Shin was already wearing strength-enhancing armor. Perk of being the son of the Hearth Mother. He thought one blow from a rock would break it. With a last look at Kyrian to see that he was ready to pull the chain, Shin raised the stone in his hand. That was when Kyrian screamed. The cage that Shin's friend was standing in front of apparently contained a nettler. The overlarge spider was named after the spikes sticking randomly from its body. It had reached through the cage and stuck one of its spikes into Kyrian. It's injected venom, and he fell to the ground, paralyzed. Shin bashed the nettler with his rock, making it withdraw back into the cage, but the damage was done. He was reaching down to carry his friend away when he heard a sound behind him. Looking back, all he saw was something falling towards his face, and then blackness. When Shin came to, he was bound in front of the fire. Kyrian was tied up on the ground next to him. The boy was awake. Nettler, venom, while potent, was also short-lived. His friend was struggling to shout, but was gagged as well. Kyrian's face was bloodied, and one eye was swelling shut. Look, the other one is up. The face of the scarred man came into Shin's view. Well, hello, little guy, the man said with false kindness. Now we haven't been introduced. I am Broyan, and these are my men, he said with a mockery of a flourished bow. He loosened Shin's gag. What is your name? Shin looked up at the man, defiantly not speaking. Broyan smiled happily and slapped Shin soundly across the face. The sprite saw stars and tasted blood in his mouth. He blinked his vision, clear and focused back on the man's face. He steeled his expression and looked back into Broyan's eyes with his lips pressed firmly together. The man laughed loudly and was joined by his men. Well, you have some fire in you. I'll give you that. He slapped Shin again, harder this time. The sprite's head fell back and bounced off the ground. He might have lost consciousness for a short period. When he was able to focus, he realized that he was gagged again. He looked about and saw that Broyan was standing over Kyrian. There you are. Thought I might have hit you too hard, little guy. Now, Shin, the sprite's eyes widened. Yes, I know your name. Kyrian here was much more cooperative than you were. He told us your name about the hearth tree, and he told us something else. It was your idea to come and try to steal the results of our hard-earned labor. Kyrian was staring at Shin, tears running down his face. His eyes silently begged for his friend's forgiveness. Shin tried to communicate with his facial expressions that there was no need to even ask. It was clear that the men had been abusive. Now that makes you the leader, Broyan said. The boss, the shot caller, him that lays down the law. The man laughed. Now, as one boss to another, let me take this opportunity to teach you something. It is important for a boss to consider all of the angles. You need to expect the unexpected. You didn't expect the spiked spider to be in that crate, which is why Kyrian here was paralyzed, which is why Raw was able to slam his truncheon into your face. Do you understand? Broyan looked at Shin's angry face and smiled. Good. I'm glad you're listening. Now the next thing you need to know as a boss is that it is important to keep your men happy. My man Tick over here, Broyan indicated one of the other men. Wave to Shin. Tick. That's nice. As my MAM used to say, good. Manners cost nothing, but bad manners might cost you your balls. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. As I was saying, Tick here wanted another show tonight. Earlier, I said no because I thought it might be wasteful. These animals we caught are precious cargo. But Broyan walked back over to Shin and stooped down. His voice lowered and his smile turned evil. We have more options now, don't we? Standing quickly, the man clapped his hands together, walking back over to Shin's friend. His voice was magnanimous once again. Now, the next thing I want you to learn isn't a boss to boss lesson. It's more of a man to boy type of lesson. He picked Kyrian up by the throat and removed his gag. The boy struggled to breathe, but still couldn't catch his breath in with Broyan's hand tight on his neck. This lesson is called, if you make a mistake, sometimes others pay the price. And with that, he dragged Kyrian across the camp and dumped him into the crevasse. There was a moment of stillness, as if the land itself was taking notice of the atrocity being committed. Then there was a low growl. After that, the night filled with screams. 4 of the men ran over with torches to watch the show, hooting and hollering. Not Broyan, though. He just stared at Shin the whole time, that evil smile on his face. He watched the sprite struggling to get free, screaming against his gag, threatening muffled curses with one breath, and tearfully begging for his friend's life the next. Through it all, Broyan just watched, unmoved and still smiling. Through it all, Kyrian screamed Shin's name, begging his friend to save him. The Razorling wasn't starving anymore, so it didn't rush. Kyrian didn't stop screaming for a full hour. At least that is the way it seemed to Shin. It was hard to tell, though. He reached his emotional limit before it was done, like a rag completely wrung of water. Though Shin didn't have the word for it at the time, he later realized he had fallen into a glassy-eyed form of shock. Blessedly, the pleading screams of his best friend being eaten alive stopped, searing his soul after a time. After the Kyrian was dead, Broyan came up to him and started talking again. None of it registered to Shin, but several hard slaps. Later, he was forcefully brought back from the stupor he had retreated to. Stay with me, boy, the man said. The pleasant tone was still in his voice. It's time for your final lesson. Are you ready? Good. He loosened Shin's gag again. Then he picked the boy up by the throat, holding a torch in the other hand. Now pay attention because this is the last thing you will ever learn. No one messes Gak. Broyan's hand loosened its tight hold on the young sprite's neck. Shin looked at him confused and realized Broyan's last words had cut off because of the arrival of the arrow that was now protruding through his neck. Broyan's grip slackened further, and they fell apart. Blue streaks struck the other 4 men in quick succession. Barely any of the men had time to do more than start begging for mercy before a second, then a third volley hit, claiming their lives. The only one left alive was Broyan. Face stuck in a half-snarl, half-bloody grin, he reached his hand towards Shin's face. In the flickering light of the drop torch, Shin could see a small tattoo at the juncture of the man's index and middle finger. It was a hexagon with 3 circles. In the center, he couldn't look away from that small tattoo while the killer's hand grew steadily larger in his vision. Shin still felt fear, but more than that, he felt a hate that would fester in his soul for many years to come. Past Broyan, he saw a sprite warrior walk up with her weapon raised. Shin screamed, "New!" Her blade plunged down, and Broyan's hand fell limp to the ground. His eyes stayed open, staring at Shin and at eternity. His mouth kept that same insane bloody rictus. In the days and years following the incident, the story came up from time to time. Some mused that Shin had screamed no because he was begging for the man's life despite what the human had done. Others wondered if he was mad with grief and had thought the sprite warrior was coming to kill him and not Broyan. He never told anyone that he screamed no. For one simple reason. He had been hoping the Razorling was still hungry. Chapter 24. Shin's mind was back in the present day. The weight of what he had just lived through caused his shoulders to droop, and tears fell down his face. He curled up onto the floor of the tunnel. Alone, he wept for remembered pain and forgotten guilt. Behind him, there was still only a blank wall. In front of him was a tangle of roots. They writhed across the entire shaft, stopping any possibility of forward movement. The random motions steadied into the form of an expressive face. He would not have been able to see anything if not for the moss attached to the roots. They gave off a soft green illumination. It was more than enough for him to see his immediate surroundings, but the end of the tunnel disappeared into darkness. Why did Kyrian die? The face asked in a rich, deep voice. The words echoed quietly, fading into a distant rumble. As it spoke, some of the words of the surrounding the banded door appeared in front of him. The glowing blue letters hung in midair. The passage of birth is the loss of the womb. The safety of illusion is shattered by the truth of pain. Any being would be crushed to carry the world on his shoulders. Know thy limitations, too. Transcend them. Shin didn't answer at first. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. He thought over and over. Why did Kyrian die? The voice repeated. What do you want me to say? Shin asked in a quiet voice. Why did Kyrian die? I don't know. I didn't mean for it to happen. He cried out. The face just stared at him, and he heard a forest lark. Shin, why didn't you wait for me? I told you I was coming. Two. Not again. Not again. He thought over and over. Shin's spirit struggled and fought, but had no more control this iteration of memory than he had the last. He was forced to watch his long-lost friend through young eyes again. He relived their halcyon days, spent in search of adventure. He sat through the horrors that can come from men's dark desires. He felt hate again take root in his soul at the agonizing death of innocent Kyrian. He was back in the tunnel. The blue words hung in front of him. Why did Kyrian die? Shin looked up, his tears making streaks in the dirt that caked his face. I killed him, he screamed in anger. My best friend is dead because of me. Is that what you want to hear? The face took on a regretful expression. A forest lark sang. Shin's eyes grew wide in panic. He raised his hand in protest and entreaty, a shout on his lips. Suddenly, though, he was in a forest. Shin, why didn't you wait for me? I told you I was coming. Two. Don't take so long next time, Curry, Shin said laughing. I heard the hunters say they had seen the humans at the boundary of the territory. Are you ready? Shin's spirit began to fray as he had to sit through this cruel farce yet again. As he sat vigil over his younger self for a third time, he wondered if he was losing his mind. Was that the point of this LATST test? Was it actually a trap meant to wear down the mind and spirit of anyone who dared to try and conquer this dungeon? Broyan's hand fell limp into the dirt, a bloody sneer on his face. A deep voice asked, why did Kyrian die? Shin could barely summon the strength to reply. He knew that. He had to try, though, opening and closing his mouth to moisten it. He spoke. I'll give you anything you want. Just tell me what to say. Shin cried softly. Please, please just stop. He tried to put strength into his last words, but came off as exactly what it was, begging. The face stared at him, blue words hovering in the air. Was that a sympathetic expression on its face? He smelled decaying leaves. Mud hit the back of his neck. They found a slain deer. Kyrian screamed his name until the sounds he was making turned into wet burbles, which then turned into nothing. Why did Kyrian die? Shin's shoulders slumped, defeated. Did repeating that painful day cause measurable damage to him? Or did he feel like this just because of the strain of what he was going? In either case, he had nothing left. Sometime during the last cycle of events, he had soiled his real body. Even that didn't merit an emotional reaction, though. He had lived through Kyrian's death 4 times, 5 if you counted. The time it had originally happened in real life. The second time had not been easier. The third time was just as wretched, but the fourth removed any hope he had of escape. He felt the emotions just deeply as he had all of those years ago. Kyrian's screams tore at his soul just as painfully every time. I can't tell you, but one should have to endure this, Shin breathed. He didn't even bother looking at the face. He knew that nothing would stop this, so he quietly asked, please just let me die. A bird called. Shin waited to hear Kyrian speak. He thought about an eternity, trapped, reliving the worst day of his life in an endless loop. Then he decided to not play this sick game anymore. He couldn't control what his younger body would do, but he could control how it affected him. If he had to spend time with his best childhood friend, then he would enjoy the experience as much as possible. Shin, why didn't you wait for me? I told you I was coming. 2. Shin finally let himself feel joy at seeing his old friend. It's good to see you, Curry, he said with a smile. What? That wasn't what he had said. After reliving the events 4 times in a row, he knew every word, every nuance, and inflection. That was definitely not what he had said. Okay, Kyrian said with a confused expression. I just saw you an hour ago. Shin lost his focus, confused by what was happening. Don't take so long next time, Curry, his younger self said, laughing. I heard the hunters say they had seen the humans at the boundary of the territory. Are you ready? Kyrian looked doubtful. Yeah, of course, I am. But maybe we should go tomorrow or the next day. Elder Yaman is making sprangle berry pie today, and Shin committed to the moment again. You might be right. He paused a moment. I think that I have to go. But you could stay? He gave a small laugh. Maybe just save me a slice of pie. Shin didn't know what was happening, but maybe, just maybe, he could save his friend this time. Kyrian stared at him for a moment, confused that his friend was being so gracious, but also delighted that for once, he might avoid being caught in one of Shin's harebrained schemes. After thinking it over, though, he just gave Shin a roguish smile. Nah, her pie isn't that great anyway. Let's go see some humans. Haha. Shin's spirit took a back seat again, and events unfolded the way they always had. As the 2 boys were walking, Shin wondered how he had forgotten what a troublemaker Kyrian had been. At least half of the trouble the 2 boys had gotten into had been because of something Kyrian himself had come up with. Mentally shaking his head, he held true to his decision to stay in the moment. He laughed with his friend, telling funny stories and laying jokes. Unlike the last 4 times he had relived these days, Shin's spirit fully committed to sharing the joy of his younger self. He didn't let the events he knew were coming tomorrow ruin his proverbial today. The two boys came upon the human camp and had to listen to the badger's violent death. Shin just felt sympathy for his younger self and friend. He stood witness with them as they waited for the men to fall asleep. They ran from the camp, and his younger self grabbed the other sprite. "Stop, Kyrian!" "What?" his friend hissed back. "Why? We need to get away from here." Every other time, Shin's spirit had tried to force his younger self's body into actions that would have been unnatural at that age. Shin decided not to make the same mistake again. He thought he finally understood. This time, he immersed his spirit in the moment. He embraced the feeling of fear that was making his younger self's heart hammer. Almost audibly, he admitted to himself that he was ashamed that he had just sat by while that badger had been tortured. By surrendering to the pull of events, he found the strength to change them slightly. "I feel horrible about what those men are doing," Youngshin said. "I do too," Kyrian said, panting. "I can't just let it happen. I'm going to sneak back and try to free the animals." Shin paused. "Those men need to be stopped. Though, maybe you should run back to the hearth tree and alert the warriors." Shin's spirit held its virtual breath. Was he really about to save his friend? Kyrian's face was torn with indecision. He looked in the direction of the sprite community and then looked back towards the humans' encampment. He was clearly wrestling with what he should do. But then his face firmed. He looked Shin directly in the eye. "No," Kyrian said, shaking his head. "I was feeling the same way. Honestly, if you hadn't said something, I was probably going to speak up in a few minutes. Like the Hearth Mother always says, it is our duty to protect the forest and its creatures. I'm going back with you. You don't have to," Youngshin said. His spirit was silently pleading for Kyrian to just keep walking away. He literally couldn't say any more though. "Of course I do," Kyrian said with his rakish grin. "We meet every danger together till death. Or have you forgotten the oath we swore under the hearth tree?" Shin's spirit reeled with shock. He had forgotten there was no oath more serious for their people. Years before the events Shin's spirit was being forced to relive, the two boys had drawn blood from their fingers and mixed it with the dirt beneath the hearth tree. Then they had sworn eternal friendship and allegiance with the earnestness that only children can produce. Their mothers had tanned their hides when they found out they were making oaths at such a young age, but hadn't deterred them. That was why Kyrian always followed Shin on his adventures, and why Shin did the same when the situation was reversed. The two boys started walking towards the camp. The following events played out as scripted. They were still captured. Kyrian was still tortured before death, and hate still wormed its way into Shin's young heart. A hate that would ultimately lead him to let a good man be eaten alive while he stood by and did nothing. The outcome had not changed. For the first time, though, Shin realized that maybe changing history wasn't the point of whatever this was. Perhaps the point was to change who he was in the present. Why did Kyrian die? Shin was laying on the floor of the tunnel. He couldn't seem to scrounge up the will to move. Or maybe he lacked the strength. The distinction didn't seem important right now. His lips were sore, and when he ran his tongue over them, they felt like dried meat. When he first tried to respond, only a squeak came out. The face, made of roots, seemed to understand that he was trying and didn't repeat itself. It merely waited. Shin was in a daze, and nothing seemed quite real. He became aware that both his health and stamina bars were perilously low. There was an icon that looked like a pile of salt next to each of them. He mustered the strength to drink one of the healing potions Richter had given him. He barely had any rise in his health bar. The portion of the bars that weren't filled with color weren't just empty. They looked grayed out like nothing could fill them. When he examined the pile of salt icon, he learned what it meant. He was dehydrated. He was literally dying of thirst. Shin knew he wouldn't survive another cycle of memories, but he accepted that. Even though he was still impossibly weak, he tried to sit himself up. That did not work out well. When he regained consciousness, he realized that he must have passed out from the strain. After that, he decided that he could give his answer lying down. He raised his head slightly and saw that the face was still looking at him. The health potion had at least served to moisten his mouth. Why did Kyrian die? Shin repeated. He died because he and I were too dumb to listen to our elders. He died because we put ourselves in a dangerous situation. And he died because we were unlucky enough to stumble across evil men. My best friend died because of who I was, and because of who he was, and because sometimes things just fall apart. It doesn't matter why he died. What matters is that I will remember him. He mustered his remaining strength for what could be his last words. So you do whatever you need to do. It does not matter why my friend died. It matters how he lived. With those last words, Shin's head dropped back down to the floor of the tunnel. He kept his eyes on the face made of roots, but he was completely exhausted. The face just smiled, though, and then the roots unraveled, leaving the way to the next chamber open. A prompt filled his vision. You have just completed the secret quest, the wisdom to tell the difference. You have delved deep into your worst pain. This trial by fire did not destroy you, however. It tempered you into a better version of yourself. In every life, there will be sorrow. Some choose to run from it. Others assume responsibility for that which was always out of their control. Many hide behind excuses, and still more try to force an outcome that is beyond their ability. You have taken a finer path. You accepted both the good and ill that you have committed. You have proven that you have the ability to face the truth. May your insight serve you well. Reward 5,000 experience. Personal reward. Wisdom plus 10. Personal reward. A new ability. You have received the ability. Know thyself. You faced your internal demons and controlled them. As such, you will be much more resilient against spells or effects dealing with the enchantment. School of Magic, i.e. Charm, Daze, Compulsion. He had barely finished reading when he heard Shin, 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 Yoshi, Daniela. I can see him. Come quick. Then he was moving backwards. He would move and then stop, move and then stop. He realized he was being pulled by the forgotten rope Richter had tied around his waist. He also realized for the first time that he was not about to die. The emotional drain of his ordeal had let him ignore the demands of his body. Now that he again had hope, though that separation from reality dissolved, he began to feel every ache that his prolonged immobility had caused. Also, the dry parchment that comprised his throat felt like daggers sliding against each other when he swallowed. In no time at all, Richter had pulled his companion free of the tunnel. In no time at all after that, he was peppering the sprite with questions. Where have you been? What happened? What's with this secret quest? Are you alright? Why aren't you talking? Shin just stared up at his giant of a friend. Richter was sitting on the ground, half cradling his friend. The sprite's legs sprawled across the floor while his back leaned against Richter's chest. The support was welcomed because otherwise he would be probably just be lying helpless and flat on the floor. Despite that, after everything he had just gone through, Richter's exuberance was a complete overload of the senses, not having the strength to curse his friends. Attentive but irritating behavior, he just let the twitch in his left eye communicate that for him. He also decided to succinctly verbalize his most heartfelt desire. Water, he croaked. Richter immediately reached into his bag and brought out a water skin. Placing it to Shin's lips, he let a slow trickle of water flow out. Shin hacked and coughed up that first sip. It made the pain in his throat increase exponentially. A few scant drops were swallowed, though, and some was even greedily absorbed by the tissue of his pharynx. The small amount of moisture he retained let him swallow more of the next sip, though he still coughed some up. It was as if his body refused to believe in a world that he wasn't dying of thirst. By the third sip, he was able to keep from coughing, and a few precious drops slid down his throat. When he drank a fourth time, he swallowed a whole mouthful, and a sensation that could only be called bliss permeated his every cell. He closed his eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. When he opened his eyes, he saw his three comrades staring down at him anxiously. For their benefit, he gave a weak smile. They all visibly relaxed. He closed his eyes again, and Richter put the water skin back to his lips. For a while, that's all he did. Slowly, sip water, and enjoy the sensation of bringing his body back from the brink of death. When he had his fill, he looked at the rest of his party and said, I have been on a journey, several in fact, and while I will eventually tell you everything that happened, I can't right now. The experience is too fresh, and sharing it might break my heart. Daniela reached out and held his hand, squeezing lightly. Besides, Shin continued, I seem to be lying in my own feces. Would you help me? He asked Richter, somewhat embarrassed. Of course, his friend said, moving slowly so as not to jostle. His companion, Richter, stood and cradled Shin, carrying him to the pool of water. With a wry smile, Richter said, I was trying to be polite and not mention the smell. Oh, is that why you looked like that? I thought you were just constipated, Shin replied. Richter gave a small chuckle and started walking toward the underground lake. Shin looked up at his best friend and thought how lucky he was that in only one lifetime he had found two men who were like brothers to him. Then another thought occurred, and he said, if you tell anyone you carried me like this, I will literally cut your balls off. Richter just laughing and kept walking. Chapter 25. After Shin was cleaned, he promptly fell asleep. He drifted in and out of consciousness over the next day or two. While he was awake, he told his group about how he had been reliving the past. He didn't include every minor detail, but he did share the salient points. He answered their questions as best he could, but much of What he had experienced was indescribable. When he was done speaking, he further explained how the events of those long lost days had contributed to his initial animosity towards Richter for being a human. He asked for forgiveness. Richter, of course, said it wasn't necessary, but thanked him for the apology and looked away. Shin saw a faint glisten in his friend's eye before he turned his face. Daniela was feeling much improved and had more color in her face. Yoshi still looked wan, but at least was able to walk and talk. He wouldn't discuss exactly what the demoness's last spell had done to him, simply saying he would be fine. Shin also explained the secret quest. Apparently, all of the party members had been notified that the quest had been completed and gotten the experience, but not the personal reward. Richter complained jokingly that next time Shin finished a secret quest to let him drink a potion of clarity first next time. Right after that, though, he shared with a big smile that the quest had let him reach level 17. Shin received a shock when he was told that he had been in the tunnel for almost 3 days. It was no wonder he had almost died of thirst. Daniela told him that through the entire first day, Richter had barely looked away in hopes that he would reappear and he could be pulled to safety. Daniela had tried to convince him to leave the hole the next day by saying she would watch. Yoshi had awoken, so he offered to help too. Richter still wouldn't agree until Yoshi pointed out that standing around wasn't helping his friend. That reasoning apparently worked because against both Daniela and Yoshi's protests, he had walked up to the sigil-inscribed door and walked in. Yoshi was mustering the strength to go in after him when, surprising both sprites, he walked back out 5 minutes later with a key in one hand and a tube in the other. What happened? Shin asked. How did you beat the last door so quickly? Richter smiled. It was a riddle. When I walked through the first door, it shut behind me and vanished. All that was left behind me was a blank wall. Shin nodded in sympathy, knowing exactly what that was like. In front of me were 2 more doors. Each door had a sculpture attached to the front. The one on the left was a blonde-haired angel dressed in white. The door on the left was a red-headed succubus dressed in nothing. He gave Shin a wink. Daniela sniffed in the background. Well, they both started talking in sync. The gist of it was that one door led to safety and the other led to certain death. No matter what question was asked, one statue would always tell the truth, and the other would always lie. Trick was, I didn't know which statue was the liar. Sue, Shin asked, drawing the word out. How did you figure it out? He asked impatiently. Well, Richter exclaimed, clearly enjoying torturing his friend, little bit by drawing the story out. I just asked one what the other would say if I asked what the right door was. Then I went through the door opposite to what she said. Richter's tone was offhand as he relayed the solution as if such logical leaps were commonplace. Shin's face screwed up as he tried to work his way through his companion's reasoning. It had obviously worked, or he wouldn't be here, but thinking through the various permutations was starting to make his head hurt. How did you figure that out so quickly? Shin asked. Richter laughed loudly, then extended two fingers on both hands in what he told Shin were called peace signs. He slapped his fingers together twice quickly and said in a gruff voice, hashtag David Bowell Beeringt. He reached into his bag and pulled out the pipe he had found, showing it to Shin. It had 4 grooves cut into it, and the handles of each the 3 keys they had collected fit perfectly into one of the grooves. One end of the pipe had a lens, and the other end had a stylized eye etched into it. When he had gone through the door, the succubus one, Richter added with another wink, there had been a small room with just the key and the pipe. He had then walked back the way he had come. The door back to the central chamber had reappeared by the time he tried to leave. So you just sat around waiting for me to come back? I guess. You missed me, Shin said with a little grin on his face. Well, I did take to finish my first lore book, and I gained the skill. I also, took the time to do some training, Richter said, examining his nails. He's been casting nonstop, light spells, his grease spell, moving around hasted. The worst has been that damn fire spell. Yoshi snapped. He would shoot one of those icicles and then melt it over and over. It's not like the smell in here was that great to begin with. So that's why it's so muggy in here, Shin said with a laugh. What else was I supposed to do with time to kill and an entire village monopool to play with? Richter said, laughing too. Then he sat down next to Shin, and the levity left his face. That just leaves your key. After we pulled you out, I tried to crawl into the tunnel too, get to the chamber on the other side. When I put so much as a hand inside though, the tunnel starts closing shut. I looked at the writing round the hole again, and it had changed. Now it says, only the proven may pass. He looked earnestly at his friend. I know you have been through a lot, but will you try to get the key again? Shin nodded. I don't think there is anything left to fear. Let me try now. His health and stamina were back to full strength. The pile of salt icon had disappeared after the first day. Shin walked over to the open hatch and climbed into the shaft. He couldn't lie and say that his heart didn't start pounding harder. When he reached the halfway point, and he couldn't help but steal a glance backwards. The tunnel remained open though, and the roots remained in place. He made it to the end of the shaft and saw a brown key hanging from the wall. There was nothing else in the room. He climbed back into the tunnel and was soon standing with his party again. Richter took the key and put it with its brothers in the pipe. When the last key was in place, all four moved of their own accord and locked into position perpendicular to the pipe. Two keys stuck out from each side. They all walked up to the banded door, Alma draped over Richter's shoulders. He held one end of the pipe up too, his eye as indicated, and looked down the length through all four keys holes. Richter gave a surprised grunt and walked up to the right side of the door, choosing a spot somewhere in the high middle. He raised one hand, the other still holding the pipe up to his eye. After moving his hand back and forth slightly, as if looking for the exact right spot, he pushed his bare palm against the door. Both Daniela and Shin reached forward in protest. Clearly, Richter had forgotten about the deadly shriek venom. He didn't fall to the ground screaming, though. In fact, his hand seemed to disappear into the metal of the door up to his mid-forearm. Richter strained for a second and then gave a grunt, turning his wrist slowly. The right. He kept up this slow rotation until his wrist had turned 90 degrees, then pulled his arm back out. Immediately a large clanging could be heard. Richter quickly stepped back. The bands of metal vibrated, and then the entire door started. Turning to the left, the grinding sound of metal continued. The movement of the door acquired an upward component, and it became clear that what they were seeing was a giant sphere. After minutes of watching the slow rotation change direction several times, it finally stopped. A doorway was set into the part of the sphere they were finally presented with. 4 keyholes were present in the door. Each one followed the next, making a diagonal. The keyholes were distinct colors, making it easy to see which key went where. After removing them from the pipe, Richter placed each key in the correct slot. When all of them had been turned, there was a loud thunk, like a bolt drawing back, and the door swung open. Congratulations! You have finished the quest. Unlock your power too. As you have already mastered air magic, you may now choose another of the powers that comprise your domain. Your options are life, dark, or water. Which path will you choose? Reward 11,000 to 150 base 9,000 experience. Choosing a power will give you a plus 50% effectiveness increase to spells of that branch. You will also have plus 50% resistance to spells of that power. Unique to being a master of a place of power, however, is your access to each power's specialized ability. Life ability, bounty of life plus 30% growth for the physical manifestation of your place of power. Dark ability, hidden treasures plus 30% yield from treasure. Water ability, tranquil soul minus 30% mana cost for spells. Richter had already made his choice before he started the quest. Tranquil soul was obviously tempting. He wouldn't always be able to rely on his village's mana pool. In the upcoming fights with the bugbears, it would be a real boon to be able to cast more spells. Water magic was not his choice, though. Similarly, hidden treasures was a hard offer to pass up. What mattered, though, was preparing his village and the people in it for the future. He chose life. You have chosen mastery of life. Congratulations! You have obtained the ability, bounty of life. 30% growth for the physical manifestation of your place of power. Congratulations! You are a master of life magic. All life spells cast by you are 50% stronger. You have 50% resistance to life magic. You can teach the skill life magic to anyone with over a 50% affinity. For the skill, you can teach specific life spells to anyone with the appropriate skill level to learn them. Congratulations! You have learned the spell, Courage, improves your fighting spirit by plus 50. This is a spell of life. Cost 25 mana. Duration 15 minute. Range self. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown 15. Min. Congratulations! You have learned the spell Minor Life Armor. Defense of all armor pieces increased by +1 for versus death attacks. Cost 40 mana. Duration 30 minute. Range self. Cast time 1 seconds. Cooldown NA. You have been awarded 12,500 base 10,000 experience for your new mastery. Congratulations! You have unlocked the quest. Unlock your power. 3. Your village will increase your power, but you must care for it in turn. Currently, there is a local dungeon that needs to be cleared out. Reward. Unlock one of the powers. Yes or no? Tring. You have reached level 18. Through hard work, you have moved forward along your path. As a chaos seed, you gain 6 points too. Distribute to characteristics instead of the usual 4. You also get 25% advancement to the skill of your choice. Crush your enemies. Honor your allies. Live. You have either characteristic points or skill percentage points to allocate from the previous level. Now that you have progressed, again, you must allocate your points within the next week or they will randomly be assigned for you. Richter didn't know what was more exciting. The boost his village was about to get, all of the new points he had to allocate, or the fact that they were finally getting out of this dungeon. Freedom! The idea of it almost made him giddy. All of the party was ready to see blue skies again. He quickly chose yes to accept his new quest and got moving. He would ask Futon about it later. They wasted no time and started walking down the narrow hall. Richter was pulling up the rear and was about to enter when Futon spoke. "Are you sure that you wish to leave the column behind? My lord." Richter looked at the remnant from the doorway. "You mean I can take it with me? That thing would pay for the portal construction all by itself if he melted it down." "Hold on, guys," he called out. He walked over to the column and lowered his center of gravity by bending at the knees. His dad had warned him early and often of the dangers of lifting with your back. He wrapped his arms around the column and then heaved. "My lord," Futon began. "I got this," Richter wheezed. He stopped his pull and reset his body. Taking a deep breath, he tried to pull the column out of the ground again. Veins stood out in his neck and his face turned red. The other members of his party delayed their exit to watch. Richter tried one more time. If this didn't work, he would invest his 12 free characteristic points into strength. Kumi. He pulled with everything he had. He felt like he was squeezing the column so hard that something was going to shoot out of it. Turns out, he had it backwards. He straightened quickly, just hoping no one had heard. "Futon, how am I supposed to take this thing? It weighs a ton. It's like when you ask me to grab the altar." Richter's lips pressed together in an embarrassed moo. "Never mind. I've got it." He simply placed his hand on the column and willed its interface to come up. Now that they had defeated the dungeon, at least this level, he should be able to give it commands. At least that was how it had worked with a dark altar from the first quest to unlock his power. Sure enough, when he focused, he could now access the column's prompt. He chose remove core from the available options. A hole appeared at the top of the column. The core rose out of it and hovered 6 inches above the column. When he picked it up, the column lost its gold color, becoming nothing more than the same gray stone of the walls. For the first time in days, the central chamber wasn't bathed in golden light. None of that mattered to Richter, though, because of what he now held. "You have found magic core. Durability 15,000. 15,000. Item class epic. Quality masterwork. Weight 12.7 kilograms. Magical cores can be used to power any number of devices." Richter held the clockwork sphere above his head. Its red and white internal light painting the walls. He aimed a huge smile at Shin. Shin smiled back and said, "I heard you, Stinky." Richter's grin slipped into an expression of mild irritation. "Let's just get out of here." "Whatever you say, Captain," Toots, Shin said happily. He tried to brush past the sprite, but Shin stopped him, an aggrieved expression on his face. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "Richter, don't try to walk past me while you trailing fire," Shin took point, and the other sprites followed, leaving Richter to pull up the rear. When he arrived at the other side, he saw a second staircase leading down that hadn't been visible from the central room. Shin and Daniela hadn't even paused and were already climbing the stairs to get out. Yoshi had stopped, though, and staring down the dark staircase. His hand was slowly opening and closing into a fist. The adept didn't seem aware of the motion. Richter walked up beside him. "I know what you're thinking. I haven't forgotten about the eaters either, but we are beat all to hell. We need to have our disease cured, and Richter pulled Yoshi's shoulder to make the man look at him. I know that whatever spell you got hit with at the end of the fight took a serious toll on you. Yoshi looked back at the stairs again, still unconvinced. Richter tried another tack. Someone once told me there was no honor in pushing through a bad position. The faster we leave this dungeon, the faster we can mobilize both of our peoples to deal with this threat. Yoshi stared at the stairs a while longer, then nodded. You are right, Lord Richter. Richter raised an eyebrow. Lord, he asked, I didn't know what to make of you when we first met, but we have fought side by side. I now know you are a man of honor, strength, and courage. I call you Lord Richter because you deserve it. Richter was taken aback by the Sword Adept's praise. He reached out his hand, and Yoshi extended his own, both men gripping the other's wrist. They gave a small squeeze, then Yoshi said, but don't think this gets you out of sword practice. Richter struggled to keep a grin off of his face. Of course not. Tomorrow morning bright and early. You, me, and our cankers. Yoshi nodded and released his grip. He walked past to the stairs, but not before Richter saw him crack a faint smile. Richter followed after. The stairway wound like a corkscrew going ever upwards. They also moved somewhat at an angle, however, so the ascent took longer than it otherwise would have. After walking for almost an hour, Shin called out, I see a door. Yes, Richter shouted. His enthusiasm made his voice echo loudly in the confined space of the stairwell. But everyone was so excited to be outside again that no one complained. I'm ready for bright blue skies and sunshine. Now who's with me? Daniela and Shin cheered, and even Yoshi had a bit of pep in his step. They hurried to open the door and rushed outside, and it was nighttime and it was raining. Richter looked up at the sky and said, Universe, you're a dick. Chapter 26. Despite the fact that it was raining, they still decided to make their way back. With Futon hovering above, there was more than enough light. They all had reasons to hasten back to the mist village. Richter was somewhat concerned about running into something big and bad at night, but Alma flew Overwatch. He felt better knowing that she should be able to detect the psychic emanations of most predators or humanoids, and there weren't any flying predators that should be a threat to her. That's what Richter hoped anyway. After an hour, the sky was a slightly lighter shade of black, which Richter took to mean daybreak was near. It was tough to tell though, because the rain had started to fall even harder. All of them were completely drenched by that time. They slogged along in silence. Even though none of them were comfortable, they were still in fine spirits because every step they took was a step closer to healing and shelter. The rain did provide an excellent opportunity for Richter to train his skills. He maintained stealth almost the entire time. With his improved herb lore, the world was also alive with slightly glowing leaves, flowers, and roots. Richter realized that this was the first time he had been out in the forest at night since planting the quickening. It was true that useful plants would glow in the day as well, but they were so much easier to see at night. He plucked a good many while they traveled, remembering his difficulty with retrieving dark moss. When he first came to the land, he was delighted that the herbs seemed to basically leap into his hands at this point. The gain in his herb lore skill was minimal, unfortunately. Leveling the skill now that was level 39 was exponentially harder than it had been at the early Levels. Men, Alma thought. She sent him an image of a man in a green cloak hiding in the limbs of a tree. Another was hidden in the bushes at the base of the tree. How far? He thought back. She sent an image of the forest from a higher elevation. All he could see was trees, however. The ability to communicate psychically with his familiar was amazing, but clearly it was not. Without its limits, the Psy Dragonling didn't seem to be able to grasp the idea of precise distance. Couldn't be too easy for a flying creature to relate distance to someone that walked everywhere, Richter thought. Luckily, Alma wasn't their only option. Come back, he thought. He raised his hand for everyone to stop. Futon, kill the light, and go invisible. The remnant disappeared. Richter hunched low and hid behind a tree, the rest of the party spreading out and doing the same. After a minute, the flapping of wings heralded the Alma's return. She landed on his shoulder. Which way? He asked softly. Her body straightened like a bloodhound, indicating about 30 degrees. To the right of the direction they had been heading. Futon. Yes, my lord. Futon's disembodied voice was no more than a foot in front of his face. The remnant spoke at a low volume. Apparently, he was learning. Go in that direction, Richter said. Stay invisible and scout until you find a man in a green cloak or you reach the end of your range. If you find someone, scout around the immediate area to see if there is anyone else. After that, come back and let me know how far away they are. If you don't find anyone, just come back. We will move forward and start again. Yes, my lord. Richter walked to each of his comrades and explained the situation. All readied their weapons. The only sound was the rain, falling around them like a dull roar. 5 minutes passed, and then 10. Richter was starting to think the man was beyond Futon's range of travel when a low monotone voice spoke right in front of him. I found a figure in the green cloak, my lord. It appears to one man alone. I did not locate anyone else in the surrounding area. He is in the low branches of a tree approximately 120 yards in the direction you indicated. Was he looking in this direction? Richter asked. Futon answered in the affirmative. Richter nodded. The man must have seen the light Futon had been shining. Made sense. He would have had to be blind to miss a moving spotlight in the middle of a dark forest. When the light went out, one of the men must have run off for help while the other kept watch. Richter waved everyone over and shared the information, then made a plan of attack. We need to move quickly before it gets any lighter. Shin and Daniela, I want you to fan out in opposite directions. Go about 70 yards forward. Yoshi and I will move forward until we go the same distance. Then I'll send Futon. When he is hovering in front of the man's face, he will emit a bright light and loud sound. Then we move in while he is disoriented. Capture him if you can. I need to know who he is and where the other one went. Everyone nodded and moved to follow Richter's directions. 2 minutes later, there was a loud bang, and the night filled with light. Stark shadows were cast by the trees, even through the downpour. There was a loud exclamation of "Gah!" Then the sound of snapping trees' limbs, followed by a thud. All 4 of the party members were running as soon as the light flared. They crossed the remaining distance in only a few seconds and soon had weapons pointed at the man's throat. Richter threw back the man's hood and stared down at a somewhat familiar face. He couldn't quite place him though. He used analyze. Name, Jiddle. Wood elf, level 9. Health 150, 190ths. Mana 230. Stamina 180. Disposition, friendly. A friendly disposition? It all clicked. This was one of the hunters from the Mist Village. Richter realized he should have deduced the truth when the other man ran off into the mist. Either these men had strong magic to counteract the mist, or the two men were hunters that Richter himself had given immunity to. He looked down at the man who was groaning at their feet. Then he looked at Jitol's leg, which was curving at a point that it was never supposed to. Then, dude, this is my bad. Jitol just groaned again. It was clear they couldn't just leave the man, but at the same time they would need to set his leg before they started moving. Shin and Daniela held him down, while Yoshi positioned himself at the man's leg. It was possible that they could infect the man with their disease, but it was a chance they had to take. Either way, even if he was infected, he should have enough health to survive until they got him back to Sumiko or Hisako. Once everything was set, Richter gave a nod, and Yoshi straightened the bones with a sure and strong yank. Jitol screamed and then passed out. Shin and Daniela started tying the elf's leg into a splint. Richter cast slow heal. It wouldn't fix the break, but it would restore some of the man's lost health. Daniela had explained that it required a specific spell to heal bones, and it was well beyond her abilities. When the sprites cinched the split tight on Jitol's leg, he groaned deeply again, but didn't regain consciousness. Man, Richter thought, I owe this guy like at least a fruit basket. When we get back, they spent some time making a stretcher. The found to stout branches, and Richter donated his cloak as the final piece. Loaded the elf, trying not to jostle him too much. Then they started walking again. Richter had Futon shine his brightest light above them. He knew that reinforcements would be coming from the village soon, and he didn't want to be shot by mistake. Sure enough, less than an hour later, Alma sent him an image of a large number of armed people walking in their direction. Richter called her back to him. He didn't want an elf with an itchy trigger, finger shooting his familiar. He called a stop and again told Futon to make his light as bright as possible. The wait wasn't too long. Identify yourself, a voice called out of the dark. This is Lord Richter, Adept Yoshi, and Sprite Shin, and Daniela, he said in a strong voice. We have Jitol with us. He needs medical aid. We are with Futon. You should be able to see him. It was quiet for a few moments, and then a man came into the light. Richter recognized him as well, and his name was Janusz. As soon as Janusz saw his face, he breathed a sigh of relief. It's Lord Richter, he called out. Jitol is hurt. Everyone, come help. A motley crowd of about 20 people came into the radius of Futon's light. Dwarves in chainmail stood by with elf archers. Men carrying clubs and axes stood in front of high elves in hide and leather armor. These were his people. There were looks of uncertainty or fear on the faces of more than a few, but that didn't matter. They had come to fight, no, to protect their homes, even though they didn't know what they would face. Richter's heart swelled with pride. He heard his name on the lips of many of the men and women. It began as a scattered whisper, but it soon became a chant. Lord Richter, Lord Richter, Lord Richter. He raised his hand and said, I missed all of you as well. Now who brought me an ale? There were laughs all round, and everyone came closer, too. Clasp hands, but Richter waved them back. We were successful. But it wasn't without cost. We have been infected by a spell. I need everyone to stay back until we are healed. He turned to Janusz. Who is the fastest runner? That would be me, my lord, he replied. I'm assuming there are still people standing guard despite all of you being here? Most definitely, my lord, Janusz said with pride. We won't let anyone sneak up on us again. I need you to run ahead. Don't go into the village. When you are close, shout out to one of the guards and tell him to bring either Sumiko or Hisako. When they come close, tell them about the infection, but do not touch them. Tell them quietly. I don't want to start a panic. Respectfully ask them to meet us. I won't risk coming into the village before we are cured. And I'm sorry to ask this of all of you, but everyone here will need to be checked before entering the village. Some of the men and women started to shuffle restlessly. I know that must be concerning, but rest assured, I think any danger is minimal. I will not, however, allow any possibility of sickness into our community. Think of your friends and families that are behind the walls, and you will know I'm right. Everyone nodded and spoke silently to each other. Richter had a feeling that would be the case. Fear was a natural response in anyone, but given the chance to protect the people they loved, many would find their courage. Janusz ran off, and everyone else moved away into the mists. Richter and his friends continued behind with Jiddle, who thankfully remained unconscious. Chapter 27. The rain had stopped while the party carried Jiddle. Soon the walls of the village came into view. They weren't just earthworks anymore. The sections of wall that stood to either side of the gate were now marbled quartz. It wasn't much, but it made Richter happy to see that the defenses were improving. They were met well outside of walls by both Hisako, Sumiko, and what looked to be all of the sprite warriors. Richter caught a look of apprehension on her face. She scanned the faces of every member of the village rescue party. When she saw Richter and the sprites pulling up the rear, her face relaxed into a smile. She ran forward, evidently surprising her sprite guards, who scurried to keep up. The old girl still had some pep in her step. She met them before they had crossed half the remaining distance, and she ran up to Shin, embracing him despite his protests. The stretcher tipped, and Jiddle woke up with a cry when he almost fell. With a chagrined look, the normally zen Hisako let go of Shin, and with a wave of her hand, gold light surrounded the wounded. Would Elf's leg? His cry cut off and was replaced by a sigh of relief. Richter looked at him and saw that Jiddle had closed his eyes and was happily laying back to enjoy a pain-free moment. A moment was all he got. You do realize for sick people are carrying a healthy person. Now, right? Yoshi asked tersely. WHAO. I am sore. My apologies, Lord Richter. The wood elf started flailing around, trying to stand up. His movements were so awkward that he threatened to knock over the 4 people carrying him. Yoshi solved that problem by just dropping his corner of the stretcher and walking around to Hisako. Intentionally helpful or not, it did let Jiddle slide off to the ground. He tested his new leg and was apparently satisfied because he stood on his own 2 feet with no difficulty. The whole time, he kept up a running stream of apologies and thanks. Richter clapped him on the shoulder, laughing. Don't worry about it. Let's just call it even. Even for what, my lord? the elf asked. Nothing, Richter said with a too wide smile. Just say we're even. We're even, Jiddle asked with an unsure tone in his voice. Great, Richter said, feeling better about the whole leg breaky. Near-death thing. What's that karma? I'm squeaking by on a technicality? He said we were even. You just don't get it. Richter brought his mind back to more important things. Hisako, he said, it is good to see you. I find myself in need of your help. I see that, she responded wryly. Just how did you get infected with cankerous rot? Well, there was a crypt mistress and say no more, she said, holding up her hand. Just remember, in the future, that if you lay down with dogs, then you get up with fleas. What? Richter asked in a surprised tone. No, it was nothing like the. She cut him off again, raising her hand up to stop him. She closed her eyes, pursed her lips, and gently shook her head side to side. Tut tut, I'm not one to judge. Let's just fix you. Richter looked at Shin incredulously. Shin just stared back as if to say, what do you want me to do? Hisako ranged the four adventurers around her. Then she began chanting. The air began to glow with a diffused golden light, which infused the space around her for 5 feet. A disc of solid gold. Light then appeared at their feet and began moving upward. Once it had risen above all of their heads, she stopped casting. Richter rechecked his status page and smiled. Name, Richter. Age, 24. Level, 18. 36%. Health, 430 mana. 420 stamina. 210. Strength, 29. Agility, 24. Dexterity, 34. Constitution, 25. Endurance, 21. Intelligence, 35. Wisdom, 21. Charisma, 24. Luck, 15. Abilities, limitless. Gift of tongues, fast learner. Bounty of life, Cybond. Skills, Herblore LVL 39, 22% to next level. Alchemy LVL 1, 0% to next level. Analyze LVL 6, 7% to next level. Pierce the Veil LVL 23, 45% to next level. Stealth LVL 6, 14% to next level. Traps LVL 21, 87% to next level. Trap Disarm LVL 21, 99% to next level. Archery LVL 10, 24% to next level. Imbue Arrow LVL 5, 18% to next level. Focus LVL 3, 78% to next level. Double Shot LVL 3, 31% to next level. Drill Shot LVL 2, 40% to next level. Swordsmanship LVL 2, 15% to next level. Small Blades LVL 4, 43% to next level. Unarmed Combat LVL 1, 10% to next level. Pressure Points LVL 1, 15% to next level. Light Armor LVL 8, 18% to next level. Grace in Combat LVL 5, 38% to next level. Air Magic LVL 6, 37% to next level. Life Magic LVL 5, 82% to next level. Earth Magic LVL 4, 92% to next level. Water Magic LVL 5, 47% to next level. Dark Magic LVL 5, 22% to next level. Light Magic LVL 4, 48% to next level. Fire Magic LVL 5, 9% to next level. Map Making LVL Max. Trade LVL 14, 86% to next level. War Leader LVL 2, 43% to next level. Portal Construction Apprentice. Lore LVL 1, Marks, Master of Mist Village. Blood Oath, Resistances, Air 50%, Earth 20%, Life 50%, Mental 15%, Spiritual 15%, Race, Human Chaos Seed. Reputation, LVL3, you seem like someone worthy of my attention. Alignment, neutral. Language, all. He felt stronger as soon as the light finished scanning him. Quick check of Shin's page showed he had been cured as well. Name, Shin. Age, 44. Level, 12. 32% to next level. Health, 230 mana. 240 stamina. 140. Strength, 18. Agility, 18. Dexterity, 54. Constitution, 18. Endurance, 14. Intelligence, 24. Wisdom, 13. Charisma, 10. Luck, 12. Abilities, woodcraft, concealment, know thyself. Skills, Herblore LVL11, 51% to next level, 96% affinity. Alchemy LVL6, 17% to next level, 9% for affinity. Archery LVL12, 59% to next level, 96% affinity. Imbue Arrow LVL8, 12% to next level, 87% affinity. Double Shot LVL3, 32% to next level, 98% affinity. Drill Shot LVL2, 45% to next level, 98% affinity. Stun Shot LVL3, 17% to next level, 99% affinity. Tracking LVL5, 62% to next level, 98% affinity. Swordsmanship LVL9, 82% to next level, 91% affinity. Air Magic LVL7, 61% to next level, 95% affinity. Marks, none. Resistances, types of magic. Life 10%, Earth 10%, Light 10%, Schools of Magic, Enchantment 50%, Race, Wood Sprite, Reputation, LVL1, who are you again? Alignment, +2, Language, Sprite, Common Tongue. Sumiko walked up. I have checked everyone else. They are disease-free. It is safe to return to the village. It is good that you have come back, Hisako said. There is much to discuss. We have found one of the bugbear's camps. We need to get ready to move against them. There have also been more monsters seen in the vicinity of your village. I take that to mean you were successful in unlocking another of your powers? I was, Richter said. But what does that have to do with monsters? I told you before, your growing power will not go unnoticed. Your place of power is awakening. You will find the lands surrounding your village to be more dangerous than before. Though you can directly access your power, all of the surrounding lands will be impacted by the reawakening of your place of power. Stronger monsters will be drawn to your settlement, and even existing creatures may grow more powerful. That is why we need to remove the danger of the bugbears as soon as possible. You may be facing enemies on different fronts soon, but your settlement is a much higher level than mine, Richter protested. Why aren't there high-level monsters near the hearth? Tree, he didn't need more enemies to fight at the moment. Leveling opportunities were great and all, but enough was enough. She laughed without any real humor. Oh, there are. We just constantly patrol to keep the lands around us relatively safe. If you remember, that is how you met Shin. From what you have told me, you were brought to the land very close to the hearth tree. If you had started farther away, well, then you would have had a very different experience. Richter thought again about his fortuitous starting point. It was becoming clear to him that the advantages he had been provided, the safe haven of the glade, Zutrix's advice, the pool of clarity, none of them had been small things. Put all together, well, he just might owe a large debt to someone out there. What would he do? When they came to collect, the situation is worse than you know, Hearth Mother, Yoshi, said. We were attacked by eaters. A colorful sequence of profanity spewed from Hisako's mouth. Richter stared at her, not just in shock, you understand, but also because he was thoroughly impressed. When the bile stopped flowing, she just stood there for a few moments. When she spoke, again, there was no uncertainty in her voice. If the scourge has indeed returned, then it must take precedence. She started walking, and they all fell in step with her. She looked at Richter. I had hoped that our two peoples could deal with the threat of the bugbears, but if eaters are now involved, we will need more allies. I will send an emissary to reach out to the wood elves of the northern forest. We have a long relationship of mutual protection. I need you to try and broker aid from some of the dwarf tribes of the serrated mountains. Can you do that? Richter nodded. It was time he got to know the neighbors. Anyway, good, she said, a serious expression on her face. The dwarves have never been enemies of my people, but neither have they been friends. They will not often involve themselves in the affairs of others unless there is a direct benefit to them. Do you mean I will need to bribe them? He asked. She just arched an eyebrow at him and then turned forward and kept walking. Richter shook his head. Why did it always come down to money? No, that's not the real problem, he thought. It was that it always seemed to come down to his money. Alma flew off as they got closer, no doubt in search of game. She had hunted constantly since they had been back above ground. Richter was sure that a squirrel hole or bird's nest would have a vacancy soon. When they crossed into the boundaries of the village, Hisako spoke to Yoshi. You need further healing. Sumiko, go with Yoshi and heal him. He has internal injuries, forestalling any argument. Hisako also said, I won't hear any argument. We have many enemies. I need you to be at top form. Now go. Yoshi bowed slightly and walked off with Sumiko. Richter, I am going to send some of my warriors to the site where you found the eaters. Hopefully, the nest hasn't grown too large yet. Shin, Daniela, are you ready to travel? Yes, Hearth Mother, she said. Yes, Hearth Mother, Shin repeated. Then restock and be ready to leave in an hour. I need you to lead us back, she said. Randolphus would like you to see him as soon as you can, she said to Richter. I have preparations to make. Please excuse me. She walked away then, with the stride of a determined woman who planned to do serious things. The other sprites walked on in tow. Richter sent Futon along to check in with the various craftsmen. He was sure the lack of mist workers had slowed things down. It sounded like there was no time to waste. The progress on the wall that initially had so pleased Richter now just seemed like too little too late. He walked through the village and saw that work on the new longhouse was progressing well. Like he had requested, the basic structure of the smithy was done as well. It had 4 walls and a roof anyway, and Richter took that as a good sign. Work had been started on several other buildings as well. Like he requested, they were being made out of stone. These would not be so easy to burn, and worst comes to worst, they could hold off attackers much more effectively than wood. Curiously, there were two small wooden shacks set in the center of the village, and there appeared to be guards outside of them. Richter would have walked over to figure out what was happening, but it was in the opposite direction of the Great Seal. He was fairly certain that was where he would find his Chamberlain, and Hisako had implied there was some urgency. He walked into the Great Seal and just stood for a moment with a smile on his face. When he had first claimed mastery of the Mist Village, the Great Seal had only been a chipped and faded mosaic. After claiming his first power, the clear tiles representing air had changed to a solid disk of crystal. Looking into that clear circle was like looking down into a swirling maelstrom. Now a second change had occurred. The spiral of yellow tile had been replaced. In its place was a work of art. Laid into the floor was a shining representation of a tree, created from pure gold. Each leaf was detailed, showing the smallest veins. The tree was backlit by an unseen sun and moved in an unfelt wind. There was no glaring light when he stared down at the newly awakened section of the Great Seal. But when he looked up at the ceiling, he could see dapples of light that shifted with the limbs of the tree. After a time, he walked past the Great Seal into one of the side rooms. Sure enough, Randolphus was in his office hunched over a stack of papers. "You need to get more sun, Randy." "My lord." He stood up quickly and bowed. "No one told me that you were back." Sit down, Richter said. "That's certainly what I plan to do." He plopped into one of the chairs in front of the desk. "There is a lot that I need to tell you. It looks like we are at war. In addition, Hisako tells me we can start expecting more monster attacks. And last but not least, there is a plague of giant insects called the Scourge that we need to eliminate ASAP. Before we get into LL of that though, Hisako said there are some things you needed to tell me." Randolph's eyes grew wider, and his expression grew more incredulous as Richter had continued to speak. The last seemed to take the wind out of him though, and he dropped back into his chair. The Chamberlain opened his mouth and closed it several times before speaking. "These eaters certainly are well known and widely feared," Richter thought to himself. When Randolphus had composed himself, he said, "You are correct, my lord. There are several things we need to discuss. The first, however, is what you want to do about the prisoners. We can't just continue to keep them under lock and key." Richter just looked at Randy with a befuddled expression. "Dare, what prisoners?" "Index. Richter's spells. Earth, bark skin. This spell will increase natural armor by +2. This is a spell of earth magic. Cost 20 mana. Duration 20 min. Range self. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown NA. Grease. This spell will make a 10 by 10 foot area slick greatly, increasing chance of anyone in the area falling down. This is a spell of earth magic. Cost 15 mana. Duration 5 minute. Range 25 feet. Cast time 2 seconds. Cooldown 10 minute. Summon insects. Summons a host of stinging and biting insects in a 10-foot wide circle. Causes minimal damage, but impedes concentration. This is a spell of earth magic. Cost 25 mana. Duration 5 minutes. Range 20 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown 20 minutes. Water. Ice dagger. This spell will throw a dagger made of ice at your target. This is a spell of water magic. Cost 20 mana. Duration 1 minute. Range 40 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown N-A. Air. Haste. This spell will increase the speed of the target. This is a spell of air magic. Cost 25 mana. Duration 10 min. Range 5 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown N-A. Errant Wind. Increase the dodge of your party to projectiles. This spell will only work when you are outside. This is a spell of air magic. Cost 50 mana. Duration 20 min. Range 50. Cast time 4 seconds. Cooldown 45 min. Fire. Flame. Shoot a weak gout of flame from your hand. This is a spell of fire magic. Cost 10 mana. Duration 3 seconds. Range 5 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown N-A. Life. Charm. You can convince an enemy that they are your friend. In battle, they will fight for you. Casting this upon a creature lowers their regard for you after the spell wears off. This is a spell of life magic. Cost 60 mana. Duration 1 hour. Range 20 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown 10 minutes. Slow heal. Restore 30 missing health over 60 seconds. Upon casting, this is a spell of life magic. Cost 20 mana. Duration 6 seconds. Range touch. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown 1 minute. Cure. Remove minor poison effects. This is a spell of life magic. Cost 50 mana. Duration 1 second. Range touch. Cast time 2 seconds. Cooldown 30 seconds. Soul Trap binds the soul of the target to this plane, preventing passage to the beyond at the time of death. They will instead be pulled into any nearby empty soul. Stone of appropriate size. This is a spell of life magic. Cost 30 mana. Duration 2 minutes. Range 10 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown N-A. Minor life aura. The caster's body is surrounded by a golden shield of pure life energy. Any nearby dead, or undead creatures will be discomforted. Any actual contact with the shield will cause damage to the undead. Cost 50 mana. Duration 15 minutes. Range self. Cast time 2 seconds. Cooldown 20 minutes. Courage improves your fighting spirit by plus 50. This is a spell of life. Cost 25 mana. Duration 15 minute. Range self. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown 15 minute. Minor life armor. Defense of all armor pieces increased by +1/+3 versus death attacks. Cost 30 mana. Duration 10 min. Range self. Cast time 1 seconds. Cooldown N-A. Dark. Night vision. You can see even in the deepest darkness. This is a spell of dark magic. Cost 5 mana. Duration 3 hours. Range 10 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown N-A. Cloying darkness. Cast a cone of thickened darkness from your hand. Movement and attack speed of targets decreased by 20%. All an area of effect will suffer from. Spell will not work in direct sunlight. This is a spell of dark magic. Cost 30 mana. Duration 10 minutes. Range 10 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown 5 minutes. Troubled sleep. Places your target in a restless sleep. He will be plagued by nightmares until awakening. Any attack or hostile action taken against target will awaken them. Area of effect 5 feet. This is a spell of dark magic. Cost 50 mana. Duration 1 hour. Range 15 feet. Cast time 3 seconds. Cooldown 15 minutes. Light. Simple light. Creates a ball of white light that will hover above your head, moving with you. This is a spell of light. Magic. Cost 2 mana. Duration 10 minutes. Range self. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown NA. Far light. Creates a ball of white light that can be fixed to a distant surface. This is a spell of light magic. Cost 5 mana. Duration 10 minutes. Range 100 yards. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown NA. Mirror. Creates a 6 by 3 foot reflective surface. This is a spell of light magic. Cost 15 mana. Duration 1 minute. Range 10 feet. Cast time 1 second. Cooldown NA. Richter's current weapons and armor. Armor. Sprite helmet of mana. Defense +5. Max defense +7. Weight 1.3 kg. Durability 20 to 30ths. Item class rare. Quality superb. Type light. Armor. Mana +50. Sprite breastplate of brawn. Defense +7. Max defense +12. Type light armor. Durability 21/60ths. Item class rare. Quality superb. Weight 6.1 kilograms. Strength 8. Hardened Sprite bracers. Defense +7. Max defense +10. Durability 17/30ths. Item class rare. Quality superb. Weight 3.0 kilograms. Type light armor. Dexterity +7. Studded Sprite gauntlets. Defense +6. Max defense +7. Weight 2.2 kilograms. Durability 31/40ths. Item class uncommon. Quality superb. Type light armor. Increased climbing +10. Greaves of the Wood Sprite. Defense +5. Max defense +9. Type light armor. Durability 28/45ths. Item class uncommon. Quality superb. Weight 2.8 kilograms. Movement speed increased by 10%. Reinforced Sprite boots. Defense +5. Max defense +8. Durability 18/35ths. Item class uncommon. Quality superb. Weight 1.8 kilograms. Type light armor. Silence +15. Bonus for entire set of enhanced Sprite armor. Defense given by each piece increased by 25%. Special bonus 50% less noise made while moving through forest. Special bonus +20% earth resistance. Weapons. High steel long sword. Damage 13 to 19. Max damage 18 to 24. Durability 33/50ths. Item class uncommon. Quality superb. Weight 2.8 kg. Glass dagger. Damage 8 to 11. Max damage 15 to 18. Durability 73 to 150ths. Item class uncommon. Quality superb. Weight 0.5 kilograms. Shadow high steel dagger. Damage 10 to 12. Durability 21/25ths. Item class uncommon. Quality above average. Weight 0.5 kilograms. Ignores 10% of target's defense. Steel Dagger of Life. Damage 1 to 2, max damage 8 to 11. Durability 1/20th. Item class uncommon. Quality above average. Weight 0.6 kg. Bestows +1 life damage upon successful strike +5 to death. Creatures. Charges 5/20ths. Recurve Bow of the Wood Sprite. Damage 14 to 19. Durability 35/35ths. Item class rare. Quality superb. Weight 3.8 kilograms. Traits +8. Dexterity +5% accuracy. Provides the skill focus. Sprite Arrows of Nature. Quantity 20. Durability for quarters. Item class uncommon. Quality above average. Accuracy +1. Damage +1. Arrow of Dispelling. Will dispel active enchantments on target. Arrow of Flame. Will do additional 10 to 12 damage on impact. Chance to cause burn. Arrow of Poison. Chance to poison target, doing additional to 4. Damage for 10 seconds. Arrow of Freeze. Will do additional 7 to 9 damage on impact. Chance to cause freeze. Arrow of Piercing. Will ignore up to 66% of opponent's armor. Arrow of Confusion. Target may attack anyone near, including possibly allies. Misk. Belt of Strength. Durability 20/20ths. Item class rare. Quality superb. Weight 1.1 kilograms. Traits increase strength by +4. Necklace of Scry Defense. Will block all but God level scrying. Spells. You will not be able to be seen by divination, tracking, or detection spells. Passive action. Durability to 100 to 100ths. Item class rare. Quality superb. Weight 0.4 kilogram. Bracelet of Health. Durability 10/10ths. Item class uncommon. Quality above average. Weight 0.1 kilograms. Traits increase maximum. Health by +40. Rings. Ring of Hidden Dangers. 25% to trap detection. Passive ability. Durability 15/15ths. Item class uncommon. Quality average. Weight 0.1 kilograms. Ring of Flowing Thought. Durability 25/25ths. Item class rare. Quality superb. Weight 0.1 kilograms. 20% mana regeneration. Minor Ring of Healing. Will heal 30 health on wearer. Cool down 10 minutes. Can be used twice per day. Durability 8/8ths. Item class common. Quality average. Weight 0.1 kilograms. Ring of Mana. Durability 9/9ths. Item class uncommon. Quality average. Weight 0.1 kilograms. Traits increase maximum mana by +20. Ring of Health. Durability 11/11ths. Item class uncommon. Quality above average. Weight 0.1 kilograms. Traits increase maximum health by +30 by 4. Richter's skill rank bonuses. Herb Lore. Novice. Notice low-level herbs and be able to pick them. Can detect 1 useful traits from picked herbs. Initiate can detect 2 traits from picked herbs. Can avoid 1 negative trait when ingesting. Apprentice can detect 3 traits from picked herbs. Can avoid 2 negative traits when ingesting. Pierce the Veil. Novice can see hidden traps. Initiate can see hidden compartments. Trade. Novice can smell a deal. Initiate 5% better prices buying and selling. Apprentice 10% better prices, buying and selling. Confined black markets. Portal construction. Novice can travel only between 2 points on the same ley line. Initiate can create portals to allow travel between any 2 points on the same type of ley line. Apprentice can create a portal with multiple exit points. This can only be built at a place of power. The number of destination points is determined by the number of ley lines present. Name, Richter. Age, 24. Level, 18. 36%. Health, 430 mana. 420 stamina. 210. Strength, 29. Agility, 24. Dexterity, 34. Constitution, 25. Endurance, 21. Intelligence, 35. Wisdom, 21. Charisma, 24. Luck, 15. Abilities, limitless. Gift of tongues, fast learner. Bounty of life, Cybond. Skills, Herblore LVL 39, 22% to next level. Alchemy LVL1, 0% to next level. Analyze LVL6, 7% to next level. Pierce the Veil LVL23, 45% to next level. Stealth LVL6, 14% to next level. Traps LVL21, 87% to next level. Trap Disarm LVL21, 99% to next level. Archery LVL10, 24% to next level. Imbue Arrow LVL5, 18% to next level. Focus LVL3, 78% to next level. Double Shot LVL3, 31% to next level. Drill Shot LVL2, 40% to next level. Swordsmanship LVL2, 15% to next level. Small Blades LVL4, 43% to next level. Unarmed Combat LVL1, 10% to next level. Pressure Points LVL1, 15% to next level. Light Armor LVL8, 18% to next level. Gracing Combat LVL5, 38% to next level. Air Magic LVL6, 37% to next level. Life Magic LVL5, 82% to next level. Earth Magic LVL4, 92% to next level. Water Magic LVL5, 47% to next level. Dark Magic LVL5, 22% to next level. Light Magic LVL4, 48% to next level. Fire Magic LVL5, 9% to next level. Map Making LVL Max. Trade LVL14, 86% to next level. War Leader LVL2, 43% to next level. Enchantment LVL1, 44% to next level. Portal Construction Apprentice. Lore LVL1. Marks. Master of Mist Village. Blood Oath. Resistances. Air 50%. Earth 20%. Life 50%. Mental 15%. Spiritual 15%. Race. Human Chaos Seed. Reputation. LVL3. You seem like someone worthy of my attention. Alignment. Neutral. Language. All. Name. Alma. Level 7. 31%. Health. 170 mana. 170 stamina. 170. Unused level points. 0. Abilities. Cybond. LVL1. Points to next level. 1. Cyblast. LVL1. Points to next level. 1. Brain Drain. LVL4. Points to next level. 4. Can use. Air Magic. Life Magic. Resistances. Mental. 100%. Air. 50%. Race. Psy Dragonling.